This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
This video shows Karen Adams at Mountaineer Casino hours before she vanished back in 2007. Now, 3 years later, the search to find her is back on.
Channel 4 Action News reporter Keith Jones in Beaver County with how crews now hope to solve this mystery.
Detectives and emergency responders are searching ponds like this one along Route 30 in Beaver County that don't have guardrails shielding it from the road. Years ago, officials tell me that divers would have to go in to look for Karen Adams in her car. Tomorrow, they'll have the use of sonar technology. A once cold case heats up thanks to sonar technology new to Western PA.
It allows us to put the piece of apparatus into the water, and with a 360 beam, it gives us the capability to do searches when the water bottom.
Wes Hill showed us these readouts showing exactly where items are underwater, no matter how deep. Its first major use finding this woman, Karen Adams, who went missing in March 2007. Police have a surveillance picture of her leaving a casino in Chester, West Virginia at 3 a.m. the night she vanished.
We've picked 4 potential sites that we'll be looking at. 3
ponds and the Ohio River. District Attorney Anthony Barash says they're specifically looking for the car underwater.
We know that she did make a call. We do know what tower she pinged off of. So these ponds would be beyond that particular point geographically.
But besides the phone call Adams made after leaving the casino, they have nothing else to go on. So they're relying solely on sonar tomorrow.
We have an excellent dive team in Beaver County, but they are limited to what they can see. This gives them eyes in places that they could never be able to see themselves.
So it changes the face of investigations?
Yes, for all disciplines of emergency services.
Keith Jones, Channel 4 Action News.
Now, if they do find Adams' car, the district attorney says crews will try to get it out of the pond sometime tomorrow.
Parts of my life. There's before my mom died, and then there's after.
It's affected our whole life.
How different life could have been for the Bodine family had they not been cursed by the horror, darkness, and everlasting grief of murder.
She was the staple of our world.
She was the center of our life.
Karen Bodine was passionate, fiery, creative, sometimes even a little bit strange, family says affectionately. She'd leave them little notes hidden in their books, notepads, always finding creative ways to tell them she loved them. Even in her difficult times, the mother of 3 was full of life.
She always never wanted me to go, and it was always hard for me to go too. But I remember her saying, "Don't go, stay 5 more minutes." And that's the last time I saw her.
Maybe that's what made her death in January 2007 all the more unfathomable. Detectives know Karen was hanging out with a group of people into the early morning hours of January 22nd. 5 hours later, her body was found.
It was the weirdest feeling, getting up and getting ready for my mom's funeral before I graduated high school.
Losing Karen was one thing.
The way they left her.
But learning how she was taken from them was another.
They did what they did and they were done with her. It's horrible. It's disgusting. I mean, people take more care with their garbage and they recycle.
The way they left Karen, nobody should have to, suffer that kind of indignity. She was posed, yes, definitely.
While she was stripped of her clothing, something was left on her body.
A ligature was found around her neck. I think it's unusual in the fact that everything else was removed from her body. Why was that left is a big question that I have.
It seems Karen's killer or killers wanted her body seen by many, choosing to leave her in the most visible spot on this entire long and busy road. And it seems they wanted the shock value. But why, investigators can't say.
I think when you have a case that has as little evidence as this one does and has gone on as long as it does, more than one person was probably involved. It was a very narrow time frame when she was alive, we know is still alive, to her not being alive.
In part, that's what makes this case all the more maddening.
I feel very strongly this was somebody she knew.
But a motive isn't entirely clear.
It was a very brutal attack. Who in her life would be angry enough to do that to her?
From day one of the investigation, detectives had a sighting of an 80s model brown Datsun with a lighter color camper spotted in the area about an hour before Karen's body was discovered, and a lengthy list of suspects. As investigators say, Karen had been hanging with a rough crowd.
Because I look at this case in hindsight of 13 years, and I think, man, it's so close, but yet we still haven't made an arrest yet.
Detective Hamilton's frustration reflects his dedication to the case, which is made all the more interesting by the fact that he is not a cold case investigator. He was never even assigned to the Bodine case, but that didn't stop him from taking it on.
What's the alternative? To just let these case files gather dust in a room somewhere in a records vault? That doesn't make any sense either.
If he's doing this and he's not even assigned to it, that shows passion and wanting to do something.
Answers. It's a prospect the family agonizes over.
Nothing has faded. No wounds have healed. It is still as raw and open as it was when it happened.
It just hangs over you. It's like a cloud hanging over you every single day. You know, sometimes when the sun's shining and it's a beautiful day and I'm enjoying it, I don't feel worthy.
I don't have to think about my mother's last moments every day. I want to imagine her good times. And that's all I can think about is her last few hours, and I don't want to do that anymore.
Olivia Lavoie, Q13 News.
If you have any information on Karen's murder, you can remain completely anonymous by contacting Crime Stoppers of the South Sound, 1-800-222-TIPS. You can also send your tip in through the P3 Tips app on your cell phone. And you could be eligible for a full $1,000 cash reward. More importantly, you're going to help that family.
Welcome to episode 17 of True Crime XS, and I'll be the first to admit that 2007 was the hardest year for me to get through. There were a number of things going on in the world that I paid more attention to when they were happening than anything that I'm covering here today. In fact, Meg has basically had to give me the timeline for 2007 half a dozen times over the time that we've been researching this case. This is the time period that quite literally has made us not complete other versions of this project in the past because it's so frustrating. And there are a number of comparison searches, in fact the most of any year on the killer's computer. And Meg thinks that he probably only killed 3 people this year. And I can see her perspective, but I'm not 100% sure that I agree. Ultimately, when we reveal the body locations and find the bodies, we should end up with the final timeline. And hopefully that will once and for all illuminate this killer's crime span. So let's take a look at the missing persons cases, the comparison search results, and some murders around the U.S. for the year 2007.
2007. So 2007 makes me want to fucking quit. There's several things that we can sort of earmark from the comparison searches. There's 5 or 6 cases on there. Off the top of my head, I remember that it's like the year Jaleel Karen Adams, I think Kara Kopetsky, Justin Gaines. Oh yeah, Rapinda Guerrara, Koi Vu's in there, Ashley Summers is in there. I think maybe that's all of them. This was an interesting year for me because I was following something else in 2007. 2007, I was following the federal part of Joseph Duncan's trial. There's this North Carolina case in 2007 that always fascinated me. this newspaper carrier.
Joining us tonight in the mystery surrounding the missing mom, Michelle Fiore with WBBM News Radio 780. What happened?
Well, the latest information I have for you, Nancy, is that I did speak with Plainfield Police this afternoon, and they tell me that tips are now coming into their department, and that is significant because over the weekend when I first met with the deputy police chief, he told me they had nothing at that point. They were desperate for leads, and now they are finally coming into the station. Iding says any lead, even say one that may seem insignificant to people, can be just the tip that they're looking for, and that can help bring Lisa Stebick home to her family.
Jane, what were the circumstances of her disappearance?
Well, it was April 30th was the last time that she was seen, and she works at a school cafeteria, so she reported for work that day. They saw her. Her husband is the last one that says he saw her late in the afternoon on April 30th. He said that she normally would leave in the evening to go do exercise. She'd come back 10:30 or 11. She was never seen again. Her children, though, and there are two children, have the same story that the father has, that the last time they saw their mother was late in that afternoon.
So to you, Michelle Fiore with 780 WBBM News Radio, both children who are allegedly out buying some candy, the father says he was working in the yard when she went jogging or to work out, they back up the dad's claim he saw her at 6 p.m.?
We have not spoken with the children at this point.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Repeat.
We have not spoken with the children at this point.
What can you tell me about the husband refusing a polygraph, Michelle Fiore?
You know what? Craig Stebick declined to take a polygraph test that was offered to him by the Plainfield Police Department. It was on the advice of his attorney, who is also his divorce attorney in the proceedings that he filed against Lisa Stebick in this past January. Police tell us that besides Craig, other family members and acquaintances of Lisa have also been offered a polygraph test. They would not tell me exactly how many have taken it or if any have taken it at this point.
Joining us tonight is a very special guest. It is Melanie Greenberg. This is the missing mom, Lisa Stebick's cousin. Melanie, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Nancy, for this opportunity to get Lisa's picture out there to a national audience. We're hoping someone will see her and have some new tip or lead to give to the Plainfield Police. They need something new to go on, even if it seems like an inconsequential fact. Please call the Plainfield Police and bring Lisa home safely to her children and her family.
Tonight with us, Melanie Greenberg. This is Lisa's cousin. I wish you peace. I wish that you find her alive. I can't even imagine going through what you're not knowing if she's dead or alive, or possibly alive somewhere, needing medical attention or needing help. Tell me the last time you saw her.
Well, as cousins in a large family, our last big family gathering was in December at a holiday gathering. Her sisters are extremely close to Lisa, and they last spoke with her on the Thursday before the Monday that she was missing. They had a lengthy conversation. Lisa was in very good spirits, and, you know, it's a total mystery to us, Nancy. We just can't understand because
Melanie,
there's no way that she would leave her children.
Among other cases, there was also the disappearance of Stacey Peterson, but she's not in the comparison list of the search from the killer's computer. So I'm not going to cover her here, but you should check that case out. And the next clip is actually the opening to the Cold Justice episode, which is called American Dream, and it is available for streaming online. It's worth a watch. But ultimately, it's about a case that has nothing to do with our killer. It's just something he looked up.
So we're here on a missing persons case, something totally different for us.
Yeah, how about an extra complicated challenge?
Yeah.
We are in Fort Myers, Florida, to investigate the mysterious disappearance of 34-year-old Rupinder Guraya, who was last heard from on October the 2nd, 2007. Rupinder was born in India. She's Punjabi. Her husband, Kultar, was 33. They had a 2-year-old son. And it's just sad. They came to America to live out a dream. And look what happened.
Rupinder and Kultar came to America with high hopes that they could stay here and live here and raise their son. Instead, this boy is left without a mother, and we need to get him answers. We don't have a body. We don't have a crime scene. We don't have those things that typically will help us tell a story.
Not having a body or a crime scene can make it more difficult to prove a murder, but not impossible. Our job is to re-examine all of the evidence leading up to Rupender's disappearance and figure out once and for all whether she was murdered or whether she just ran away with the expectation she was never going to be found.
And there were still a couple more names on the killer's computer in 2007. I played the clip for Karen Adams at the top of the show. Here's the next three.
Coy Dang Vu was last seen at his family's Clark County, Washington home sometime between midnight and 1 a.m. on April 7, 2007. He's never been heard from again. He was discovered missing at 8 a.m., and his bed did not appear to have been slept in. Vu's favorite jacket was left behind, as was his bicycle, which was his primary means of transportation. He has left home before, but never for longer than an hour or two, and never at night. The night of his disappearance, there was a heavy rainstorm in the area. Vu lived with his parents, sister, and brother-in-law in April of 2007. At the time of his disappearance, Vu's family was planning a trip to Seattle, Washington to celebrate his mother's birthday. His loved ones do not believe he would have left home voluntarily because he was excited about the upcoming trip. He may have traveled to Oregon, to Vancouver, Washington, or elsewhere in Washington state after his disappearance. Initially, police believed Vu simply wandered away from home, but as time passed, without his being located, they began to investigate his disappearance as a possible crime. Authorities now believe Vu was the victim of a homicide, and they think his body was put in a dumpster and ultimately wound up in a landfill near Boardman, Oregon. No suspects have been named in his case, however. Vu is described as an outgoing individual who may approach anyone. He is capable of ordering food at a restaurant, usually by pointing at items on the menu, and of buying things at stores. He enjoys playing basketball and video games. He frequented the Albertsons grocery store in his neighborhood, and he may confuse other Albertsons chain stores with that one. Vu has been deaf since birth and cannot speak. He is also mentally disabled and has the capabilities of a 10-year-old. Vu has very limited skills in American Sign Language. He may also use writing or general hand gestures to communicate. Due to his disabilities, Vu is considered to be in danger. Coy Vu was 25 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed 110 pounds. He has black hair and brown eyes. His case remains unsolved.
In early November of 2007, a 12-year-old boy named Jalik Rainwalker vanished without a trace from Washington County, New York. He was born in Albany to a mother with a drug and alcohol addiction. He bounced from foster home to foster home until he was 9. That's when he was taken in by a couple in Washington County. Stephen Kerr and Jocelyn McDonald adopted Jalik Rainwalker in 2003. Jalik was described as an emotionally troubled child. He was prone to angry outbursts. The day before he went missing, he had been staying for several days at a respite home in Altamont after threatening another child. Stephen Kerr picked Jalik up from the home on Halloween afternoon. The two were seen eating dinner around 8 p.m. at the Red Robin restaurant in Latham. Then, according to Kerr, they spent the night at an empty house in Greenwich that belonged to Kerr's father. Kerr told police that when he woke up the next morning, Jalik was gone. Kerr and his wife Jocelyn McDonald reported Jalik missing the next day. They said they believed he ran away. Cambridge Greenwich Police Chief George Bell led the search efforts to find Jalik in the days, months, and years after he disappeared. Bell died in 2018, but until his dying day, he believed Jalik was murdered. Jalik's adoptive grandparents, Barbara Keeley and Dennis Smith, also think Jalik was murdered. Stephen Kerr was considered a person of interest in the case. Police say his cell phone records show he lied about where he and Jalik were the night Jalik disappeared. Kerr refused a lie detector test. Kerr was never charged in connection with the disappearance of his adopted son. He and McDonald moved their family to Vermont 4 months afterward. They've refused to talk to police or publicly about Jalik since. In 2012, 5 years after Jalik went missing, state and local police moved Jalik's case from a missing person to a probable child homicide. In the years since Jalik's disappearance, authorities have followed hundreds of leads. More than a decade after his disappearance, the question remains: what happened to Jalik Rainwalker?
At this hour, 10 years ago, a young man from Gwinnett County was looking forward to a night out. No one would have imagined that once he left, he would never return.
It's the mystery of Justin Gaines, a decade-long mystery. Whatever happened to Justin Gaines, the case pops up in the news from time to time. As investigators follow new tips and leads, they have some theories.
Justin's mother, after all of this time, still hopes for the answer. John Sherrick and photographer Stephen Boise dig deep into the case files to tell us what may be next.
I still have hope. At that point, you still have hope that they could walk in the door.
Her hope has lasted a decade so far. A mother's hope, everlasting. Erica Wilson dreams of what her then teenage son would be like now if he walked through her door.
I mean, 10 years, he would have graduated from college. What would he be doing? It's hard to see, to realize everything he missed.
Justin Gaines vanished early one morning, very early, November 2nd, 2007. Justin was 18, a college freshman having a night out, having fun at Thirsty Thursday, a huge party of Wild Bills, then a popular nightclub in Duluth. He was there, then he wasn't.
At the club that night, there was over 3,000, and somebody knows who he left with, what happened.
We believe we know at this point what happened to Justin Gaines, but cannot find his body.
Private investigator Bob Pulno began working the case for Erica Wilson soon after Justin disappeared. Pulno is still on the case 10 years later, retired now, but not from this case. It's his last one.
There's enough information or evidence that we have gathered over the years that keeps us going, knowing that at some point there's a good possibility it'll be solved.
Being solved soon? Gwinnett County Sheriff's investigator Lieutenant Colonel Carl Sims tells us the case is anything but cold. A few weeks ago, his office worked a new tip, searching a property in Barrow County.
But as long as we keep pushing, as long as the leads keep coming in, we're going to keep working it.
Here's the timeline investigators have pieced together, a working theory of what might have happened to Justin Gaines. Inside Wild Bill's, people see Justin showing cash, wearing a diamond earring. Outside Wild Bill's, someone lures Justin into a car, possibly with a blonde woman wearing a black dress. They drive south on Pleasant Hill Road to a house in Snellville. Investigators believe that house was crowded, lots of witnesses there. As soon as Justin gets out of the car and walks into the garage, someone attacks him, beats and chokes him, and shoots him to death, and takes his money and jewelry. His attackers drive his body to Lake Lanier, to a houseboat. They attach weights to his body and throw it into the dark November cold deep. But Justin's body floats to the surface a few days later, so they load up his body again and drive, possibly to Barrow or Walton County. And this time they drop the body into a well somewhere along the Appalachie River. One of the people police questioned, this man, Dylan Glass. In 2014, Glass pleads guilty to a long list of state and federal drug charges, and Glass starts singing. Lieutenant Colonel Sims shows us a photo of Glass. He's seen here in a pawn shop right after Justin Gaines' pre-dawn disappearance.
This is a photograph of Dylan Glass the day after Justin Gaines went missing. And compare them, you're going to see that this earring is pretty much the same as this earring. Dylan Glass has told me, and he's confessed in his own way, he said that he took that earring out of Justin's ear the night that he was killed.
That photo taken November 2nd, 2007, at a Gwinnett County pawn shop. So why hasn't Dylan Glass been charged in this case?
When it gets right down to it, when we ask where the body is and we try to put closure to it, he's lied, and we catch him in another lie.
No credibility, but one of the people police know is somehow tied to Justin's disappearance. Investigators have searched multiple properties in Walton and Barrow counties. Nothing. They've recovered the earring, but couldn't find any of Justin's DNA on it. The houseboat and van gone forever. The owner of the van, boat, and house, who was possibly involved that night, died just a few months ago. All of that testing a mother's hope to its limits.
Yeah, it's fair that people would forget about him, stop looking for him because, new things happen. People go missing every day.
But Bob Pulno and investigator Sims say there's no way they'll forget. They'll keep the case red hot as long as they can. The scorching sunlight of a mother's hope, everlasting. No cold case ever here.
You brought up Tara Grinstead. It took that one break to push it over the edge. There's somebody who knows how Justin Gaines got in that car that night.
And there is this. During our interviews, investigators revealed to us that in the days following Justin's disappearance, a woman, possibly middle-aged, possibly a mother, called the anonymous tip line. She talked about a man who lived near here, Pleasant Hill and Club Drive, who she thought might be involved. Another possible piece to this puzzle. If you're that woman, police want to hear from you again. For Justin, for his mother, for her hope, for answers. In Gwinnett County, John Shurik, 11 Alive News.
Jennifer Summers is a mother tortured, wondering what happened to her beautiful 14-year-old daughter, Ashley.
I think about the worst, and then I have to stop thinking at that point.
So tortured that for a moment, she feels a glimmer of hope when a story breaks national headlines.
Help me, I'm Amanda Berry. I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years.
It's the story that grabbed the country by the throat and broke America's heart.
We were all hoping to hear a little bit more about this amazing story.
Several young women who vanished without a trace found alive. She wonders, could one of them be Ashley?
The first notification that went out to the public is 3 young females had been found.
They'd been raped, tortured, and held captive for nearly a decade by this monster. 52-year-old school bus driver, Ariel Castro.
Awful what they had to endure for all those years, but they are alive.
And a lot of people are interested to hear more about what's inside the home.
Nobody is more interested in watching the story unfold than Jennifer Summers. Despite the horror, part of this heartbroken mother is hoping it's the end of her long nightmare.
I was at home watching the news that day, and they said they found 3 girls. Well, there was only 3 girls that we all knew about in Cleveland. That was Amanda Berry, Georgina, and Ashley.
Ashley mysteriously disappeared from the same neighborhood as the other 2 girls.
We had Amanda Berry and Gina DeJesus. They had been missing since 2003 and the other since 2004.
Special Agent Vicki Anderson says when Ashley vanished, the FBI feared a serial kidnapper was hunting young girls in Cleveland.
We automatically began to lump Ashley into the grouping of Amanda and Gina.
The kids always said, "Mom, when's Ashley coming home? Where's Ashley at?" And I'd say she'd be home shortly.
After 6 torturous years without her daughter, Jennifer thought that day was finally here. Cops immediately identify Amanda and Gina, but they don't release the identity of the 3rd girl.
I immediately thought it was Ashley, so I was kind of waiting for the phone call.
But the phone never rings.
It turned out not to be Ashley. I was kind of mad that it wasn't her there.
The 3rd young woman turns out to be Michelle Knight.
I'm still waiting for the phone call today. It will be her.
So where is Ashley Summers?
I never thought that day would lead to this day.
At the time Ashley disappeared, Jennifer says her daughter was going through some serious teenage angst.
She was hanging with the wrong people and they were influencing her in the wrong way.
Ashley stopped going to school, got her new boyfriend's name tattooed on her arm, and moved into Jennifer's uncle's house.
We believe the last person that saw her was an uncle.
He told Jennifer her daughter left his house that day without saying a word.
I called my uncle to check on Ashley, and he said that she thought she went home. And so I began to call other relatives, and no one had seen her.
All of Ashley's clothes were gone, but oddly, she'd left her phone behind.
I froze. I didn't know what to do, so I immediately went to the police station and filed a missing person report.
Cleveland cops initially believe Ashley is a teenage runaway, but Jennifer says without a doubt her daughter did not leave on her own.
I used to drive around day in, day out looking for her. I would talk to her friends, find out where she used to hang out at. We put flyers up everywhere, and nothing.
Jennifer even questions Ashley's boyfriend, Gene, the one whose name she had tattooed on her arm.
He never seen her from that day either, which was odd.
Ashley never contacts a single friend or relative. And then about a month after her disappearance, Jennifer says she gets a strange call from a private number.
I answered it, and there was a Ashley on the other line and said, "It's me, Mom, I'm okay, don't worry." Click. Yeah. At that moment, I was 100% sure it was her. But now, when I replay it, I'm like, was it really her?
Was it really Ashley? Or possibly a cruel hoax? By now, both the Cleveland police and the FBI are also wondering what happened to Ashley.
It wasn't until Ashley didn't come home that it really became concerning that maybe she wasn't a runaway, or maybe she had run away, but something had happened to her during that time period.
But what?
And I'll think she's been kidnapped, and I also think about human trafficking, and then I think about the worst. And then I have to stop thinking at that point.
The FBI launches a massive search for Ashley. Over the years, friends, family, and complete strangers report Ashley sightings.
Myself and my husband saw her walking down Lorraine Avenue with her hair cut, and because she stared right in our car, and by the time I got turned around, she had disappeared down an alley.
But nothing ever pans out, leaving many wondering if Ashley is dead, or maybe she simply doesn't want to be found.
I didn't know how to feel after that. I was more hopeless.
But Jennifer's hope was about to be renewed. After years of searching, the FBI releases an age progression photo of how experts believe Ashley would look today. And of all people, Ashley's step-grandmother finds a possible match.
Ashley's step-grandmother was on the internet and came across a woman that was wanted in Rhode Island for some thefts.
The woman and a male friend went to withdraw money with a stolen ATM card, and snap, a security camera captures this image.
When we looked at the pictures, we too thought, oh my goodness, is that Ashley?
When I saw the photo, I did think it was Ashley.
The FBI blasts the security cam photo throughout the country.
We needed to get this woman in this ATM photo identified. We needed to know, if this is not Ashley, then who is it?
Would this finally be the call Jennifer had been waiting for? Or just more heartbreak for the mom so desperate to find her daughter?
And it was not Ashley.
9 years later, there's no peace at all.
Jennifer still has faith her daughter is out there somewhere.
I think she's still alive. I have to believe that.
But whenever hope fades, she thinks about those other missing girls from Cleveland who turned up alive all those years later.
I just hope to get that phone call that she's coming home. I wonder if it's going to be the day.
If you have any information on Ashley Summers' disappearance or where she might be today, you can call the FBI in Cleveland. That phone number is 216-522-1400.
Get that information right from police. Now, the mystery surrounding the disappearance of the two girls, Cara Kopetsky and Jessica Runyons, spans a decade, as we've been saying. The Now KC's digital reporter Tara Hall is here. Give us a timeline of these events for those keeping track.
Yeah, it's a good way for you to be able to break it down, because this is a lot of information to digest. So April 30th, 2007, Cara Kopetsky files a protective order against her then boyfriend. If we fast forward to May 4th, 2007, that's the last time anyone saw Cara. Let's see if we have that video. You can see here it was caught on a Belton High School security camera. Her mom says she last saw Cara in the morning before she went to school. She hasn't been seen since 10:30 that morning. Now, if we fast forward to this past fall, September 8th, 2016, that's the last time anyone saw Jessica Runyons. She was seen leaving a party with Kyler Yost. Now, her family reported her missing the very next day. And then on September 10th, 2 days after she disappeared, they found her car abandoned and burned out off of Blue Ridge Road and 95th in South Kansas City.
I'm sorry. And at least 4 alleged confessions.
He was watching her breathe out her last breath.
The man long suspected of killing Cara Kopetsky and Jessica Runyon is finally charged with their murders.
It should have never, ever happened.
Last year, we first brought you Cara's story. She was last seen more than 10 years ago, leaving school early. Phone records reveal it was 6 minutes after a call from her ex-boyfriend, Kyler Yost. Days earlier, the Belton, Missouri teen had filed a protection order against him after he allegedly abducted her from work and threatened to slit her throat.
Things got a little physical, and the next thing he knew is she wasn't breathing.
Prosecutors now say Caitlin Ferris is one of several people to whom Kyler would eventually confess, explaining how and why he killed Kara.
She basically explained to him that she didn't want to be with him anymore. Then he said he kind of just freaked out.
Private Detective Marlene Rockwell recorded another one of Kyler's girlfriends talking about his confession.
He's admitted to it to me. He told me he killed her. And he said, I've seen girls' faces turn purple. Have you ever seen the life leave someone's eyes? And I got really scared at that point.
In newly released court documents, prosecutors say in 2010, one of Kyler's bandmates was the first to go to police with news of a confession. He told them Kyler said he was angry with Kara because she wouldn't love him, and he didn't want her to love someone else.
I want the family to get some type of resolution, but at the same time, I want it the right way.
Police Lieutenant Brad Swanson, during our first interview on the Kopetsky case, explaining why there hadn't been an arrest despite the alleged confessions.
Whoever did this, I will get charged someday, and when that charge gets filed, it will stick. I promise.
But the very night that story aired, prosecutors say Kyler killed again. It was September 2016. Jessica Runyons vanishes after leaving a party with Kyler, a friend of her boyfriend. John and Jamie Runyons were about to experience the same nightmare as Rhonda and Jim Beckford.
The minute they said his name, I knew it wasn't a good thing.
But unlike in Kara's case, police had physical evidence to work with. Jessica's burned-out Chevy Equinox was found the day after she vanished. Kyler had confessed yet again, this time to a roommate. Police say that roommate was also there when Kyler burned Jessica's car. Kyler Yost was arrested with burns on his hands and face for knowingly burning a vehicle. In an eerie twist, when Crime Watch Daily tried tracking down Kyler at his grandfather's house for our original story, an Equinox identical to Jessica's was in his grandfather's driveway. A young woman came to the door, but never came outside. We can't be certain it was Jessica, but if it was, did she know Kyler had allegedly confessed to killing a girl? Her mother, Jamie, certainly did not.
When Jessica went missing, I went to the police station, and I didn't know about Kyler. I never knew Jessica had any connection with Kyler. The first thing I saw when I Googled him was Kara's name.
The Runyons would need Kara's parents for support as the days turned to months, and the search for both of their daughters dragged on.
Every time I'm down, they're right there, and we're just a great support system, and they've been amazing.
Then finally, 10 years after Kara Kopetsky vanished, and 7 months after Jessica Runyons met the same fate, their remains were found.
They say, you know, the moment you feel like you're going to give up is the moment you find answers.
A man hunting mushrooms made the gruesome discovery.
Just walking down the fence row there and looking on the ground for mushrooms, and seeing a reflection over there, and 15, 20 yards on the other side of the fence was a skull.
Not one, but two skulls. Lab tests quickly identified one as Jessica Runyons.
I was numb.
And I did my best to try to comfort her.
Because the second skull was much older, it would take longer to identify. But Rhonda always knew what the outcome would be.
We feel in our heart and our gut that it's Kara.
DNA tests did eventually confirm they were right.
It's the hardest thing anybody will ever have to go through.
The skulls were found in an area Kyler Yost likely knew well.
He has a childhood friend who he spent a lot of time with, whose farm is right around the corner from here.
Two Missouri mothers brought together by heartbreak.
We're in a group that nobody should ever be in.
Now stand together, united in the pursuit of one paramount goal.
Focus is just justice for our girls.
On the day prosecutors charged Kyler in their daughter's murders, the two mothers had one simple message of gratitude.
We just want to thank the whole community, all of our family and friends for being with all of us. And we want to thank you guys, because you guys have been our girls' voice.
Last week, the families of both girls were in court as Kyler pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of abandonment of a corpse.
I'm just ready to get this thing over with.
Sentiments no doubt shared by the parents of Kara Kopetsky. Kyler will be back in court at the end of December. Prosecutors haven't said if they'll seek the death penalty.
Explain to me the numbers, and keep in mind that this is an audio format. If he's sitting there drinking brandy going through, the dates are reversed.
Right. Okay. It took me a while because first I want to clear something up though. You don't think he was looking at Namus?
He could have been looking at Namus, but we don't know that from the comparison searches. He could have been looking at some of them in Namus, but some of them, they would have just been out in the world looking at like a news article from like ABC News, and he had that photo.
Right, and I understand that.
He still could have been doing exactly what you just said, which is missing January 1st. He could have been missing boy and the date, because that would make sense to me. And it's a way to keep it completely generic.
Okay.
And if you're drunk, that, I could totally buy that.
Right. And so I tried to, I sort of played a game. There's one that's
Did you
not
drink a bunch
on
of brandy
here.
and go hunting for missing persons?
No, I did not. But I can't imagine what that would be like. There's actually one that didn't show up on here that I am.
Justin Gaines.
Right. Okay. That's why you didn't get it. Okay.
He's 11-2. But
Right.
Justin Gaines isn't on your list that you sent. The list that you just sent me, Justin Gaines is not on there. Jalika is.
Right. Okay, so he would have been the last one on that, and I don't know why he's not there. But interestingly, that's why it made it more difficult for you to notice.
This is the point in the story that every time I get to 2007 and 2008, I just give up. That's why it took so long for us to tell this version of the story, is because of that. Or who is 112? What are you saying about
Okay,
that?
the date is January 20th, 07. And what I'm saying is that as he was putting in 10-2-07 and 11-1-07 and then 11-2-07, he was actually trying to put in 1-20-07.
Okay, because I'm about to tell you something about 12107. That's why I'm asking you.
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So I found the way that I came across this one. I looked at a shit ton of cases this year. Like 2007, I am not kidding. I have looked at so many murders and arsons and robberies and missing people. I am sick of this year. But let me just say that what I did do was I kind of figured out, if I'm going to move, Anchorage or whatever, that's the same thing as going to an area and leaving it. So they concentrate real hard on like this California stuff in 2007. And I looked before then. And here's what I did. I ran names, I ran dates, I ran locations. Rupinder, I can't figure out yet, but eventually I'm going to figure out her name, her thing. And I think you may have just solved that for me by telling me that. I had tracked, and I mentioned this to you at one point, thinking, if I'm going to move out of town, I'm going to start robbing in other towns near me. 4 different little robberies, and I know I shared at least 1 or 2 of them with you. I looked at those. I ran the name Karen Missing Casino.
Why?
And I did that because I was totally curious, why Karen Adams was in this list. Karen Adams does not fit this list in any way, shape, or form. Karen Missing Casino. Here's what I found. The murder of Karen Bodine. Have you ever looked at this?
I don't think so. I don't know.
So Karen Bodine is a murder in January on January 21st.
And this conversation was Meg explaining to me that she felt like some of the comparison searches might have the numbers transposed and might correspond with a particular missing persons case that she'd been keeping her eye on. while I was trying to tell her about finding someone who could be the reason Karen Adams ends up on that list, which is the murder of Karen Bodine and was also played at the top of the show. Her theory was that the killer in 2011 and 2012 had been a little tipsy while he was searching for his past victim. She felt like the rest of the year he would have been on his P's and Q's with his new, or at least new live-in, girlfriend. And she had focused in on a case that's in California, but not the California cases that the FBI was looking so hard at, and not even the same time frame.
Raymond Handy was last seen in Fountain Valley, California on January 20th, 2007. He drove his dark blue Honda Accord to Fremont Peak that day and never returned. He has never been heard from again. His car was found parked on a nearby dirt patch. Inside was a hand-drawn map of the area showing where Handy planned to hike. Temperatures in the area that month dropped to below zero at night, but Handy is a capable hiker with over 20 years of experience in the outdoors, and he might have survived the elements for as long as a few weeks if he had a source of water. An extensive search of the area turned up no sign of him. Handy studied chemistry at the University of California at Irvine. He is interested in electronics, and authorities believe that he had a mishap while hiking and is now deceased, but his body was never recovered. Raymond Handy was 43 years old, 5 feet 11 inches tall, and weighed 180 pounds. He has black hair and brown eyes. His case remains unsolved.
I also took a look at this case, and I tend to agree with her. And then I took a look at the rest of the year. And I put together what I think are the missing persons cases and other crimes that we should be looking at, just to see if they could have anything to do with this killer or not. At the very end, I'm going to play a piece for you where Meg has put together a comprehensive timeline of 2007, and I think you'll start to see why this year was so frustrating for me.
Jeremy Carl Burt was last seen in the 2200 block of Hervey Street in Boise, Idaho at 10:30 p.m. on February 11, 2007. He left his father's house and was en route to a friend's home, but never arrived there. Shortly after his disappearance, Burt's ex-wife, Kim George, got a text message from Burt's cellular phone stating he planned to disappear and was moving to a new address and getting a new life. Based on the wording of the messages and the context, George didn't believe the text messages were actually from him. He has never been heard from again. In May 2007, the red Mercury Cougar Burt had been driving at the time of his disappearance was found abandoned and burned in an extremely remote desert area in the Owe Desert in southwest Idaho, 45 miles north of the Nevada state line. The vehicle belonged to George. Authorities searched the car, but found no evidence as to his whereabouts. At the time of his disappearance, Burt was living with his father and his baby daughter. He had had an affair with his attorney, Jeannie Braun, and tape-recorded conversations with her about illegal activity Braun was involved in. Another individual was also secretly recording Braun, and the evidence came to the attention of the police. As a result, Braun was charged with several felonies and disbarred. Burt testified against her before a grand jury in 2004. It's unclear whether she had anything to do with Burt's disappearance, but she claims they hadn't been in touch for months prior to the time he went missing. George and Burt were on very good terms in 2007, despite their divorce. She remarried after Burt's disappearance, and she died in 2016. Although no evidence has surfaced to connect the two cases, it's worth noting that Burt and Aaron Bernard had some mutual acquaintances. Bernard disappeared from Boise in 2004 and has never been located. Burt's family doesn't believe that he would have abandoned his daughter. They fear for his safety, and they believe he may be dead. Foul play is suspected in Jeremy's case. Jeremy Burt was 33 years old, 6 foot 2 inches tall, and weighs 197 pounds. He has brown hair and hazel eyes. His case remains unsolved. Jeremy Michael Thomas was last seen fishing in Macon, Georgia at 2:20 p.m. on February 16, 2007. He had gone on a fishing trip with a friend who later went home without him. The friend stated he had gotten cold and tired and left, leaving Thomas behind at the creek. He was reported missing the next day. Searchers found his boat abandoned with his personal belongings inside. However, there was no sign of him. Thomas left behind a young son and a pregnant fiancée. There is no evidence that a crime was committed in his disappearance, but it's uncharacteristic of him to leave without warning. He may have had an accident while fishing. Jeremy Thomas was 22 years old, 6 foot 2 inches tall, and weighed 230 pounds. He has brown hair and brown eyes. He has multiple tattoos on his right hand and both arms, including a lady sitting on a moon on his upper right arm, the name Logan under praying hands on the back of his shoulder, a scorpion and a skull with a pistol on his left arm, and the phrase "pay me" on his right hand. He may have had a mustache and goatee at the time he went missing. His case remains unsolved.
Ricarda Tillman Lockett was last seen at approximately 10 o'clock a.m. on February 19, 2007, at her workplace in downtown Memphis, Tennessee. Her estranged husband had picked her up from work. Ricarda was supposed to get her infant son from the babysitters later that day, but she never arrived, and she's never been heard from again. She left behind her personal belongings, including her wallet and cell phone. Authorities were concerned for her safety, although they stated there is no hard evidence that she was taken against her will. The police had been called to her home in January 2007 after Ricarda said that her estranged husband had choked her during an argument. He was arrested and charged with assault, and Ricarda went to live in a domestic violence shelter. The husband stated he dropped her off at the shelter after they left her workplace, but shelter employees say they never saw her. He was interviewed by police after she went missing, but maintains his innocence in her disappearance. Custody of their son was given to Ricarda's relatives after she vanished, and family court documents named the husband as a suspect in his wife's case. Ricarda's boss stated she was a very reliable employee who always called into work if she was going to be late or absent. It's uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning. It was her boss who reported her disappearance to the police after she missed work 2 days in a row without contacting anyone. Her family stated they did not believe she would have run away and left her child behind, whom she cherished. Ricardo was born on the Winnebago Indian Reservation and spent her childhood in Sioux City, South Dakota, and in Memphis. She moved to Memphis permanently after she turned 18. Ricarda Tillman Lockett was 22 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and weighed 120 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved.
This is the year of John L. McGee. The doe found out at Lake Berryessa. You know that?
No, but tell me about this doe. Can you give me some? I mean, I can look it up. I just don't know what you're saying.
There's a doe found that. Okay, so she was found in 2009. Now people are starting to link this on the internet, but I linked it by location. I didn't link it by like anybody else's conversations about it. A place called Lake Berryessa. They focus in on this place in California, which pisses me off to no end, because
I know that feeling.
It contradicts what they're saying about it, because they're saying it's about going to a location far away and doing all this stuff over multiple states, and then they really want to know what he did at this one time period in California. So this is when, you know, he illuminates the world that his girlfriend/partner has had lap band surgery, you know, because that's what serial killers
You're so
do.
mean to bring that up, dude. Oh my gosh.
Okay, I won't say anything else about it. He goes to Tijuana. He goes so he's in California, goes to Tijuana, comes back to California. Well, during that time period, there's a missing woman, okay? And nobody knows when she went missing. The way that she went missing is sometime between 2006 and 2009, her family lost contact.
Oh, wait, I do know this case. I'm so sorry. I didn't check up on it. But this is the daughter identified her on television case.
Yes, like identified the bust of the doe.
Right, okay, yeah. Okay.
So I found that case because I was looking for locations that had problems for various reasons, and you know, that could be that they weren't there yet, or that they had been destroyed, or that they were closed in a way that you couldn't get to them anymore. Not closed like they had a sign up, but like some of these places they have to replace them, and some of these places they were completely upgrading the locations all through the 2000s. And when they were doing that, I did look at California, Oregon, Washington, New Hampshire, Vermont, upstate New York. And I was like, okay, so who did that? And this is one of those places where when I found one, like where I could see that they were doing something to the location, I went, all right, what's been found around there? And it's like right off a road at Lake Berryessa. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I thought for a while, I've decided against this, by the way, I think. But I thought for a while that maybe he had grabbed her, and that's who they were looking for in that time frame. This is the same time period where the guy with the car goes missing, and you're like, oh, he's in the San Francisco Bay.
We're talking about April.
And all this, there's a bunch of shit going on in Mexico for him and for Mexico. Like Tijuana had a siege, and they caught a cartel
right.
boss.
Okay, so this is, okay, I'm familiar, I believe, with the area you're talking about. I know that this is a hotbed of activity here. And I'd like to just for like 1 second sort of draw your attention back to something that I just me have kept in mind for 2007. He accompanies his new live-in girl. I mean, she's not his new girlfriend, but they just moved in together. Okay. and he accompanies her to California. She goes and has some stuff done in Mexico, medical type stuff, and they leave Mexico and they go on this vacation. Okay, and he does happen to rent a kayak. He rents one single person kayak. And I get that this is like, woo, let's see what he did. However, I digress back to he was not going to screw this up, and he didn't do anything on that trip.
And that is ultimately where I land, by the way. I hate to say it that way.
And I know that like sucks for everybody who wants that, him, because it is a lot of activity. Like there's a lot of stuff going on. He crosses the border, and all this stuff could be happening. But I'm afraid like that is, I just don't see it that way, because he is really wanting this to work out, whether it's like I don't think he was remorseful, and I don't think he planned to stop. I think he just needed this sort of stability, and I think he would have, I actually am not sure that he would have ever done something away from home while he was on a vacation with her. And you see later on they're not going on vacation together anymore, which changes everything. By the time the shed was in his driveway, they were basically not together anymore. And that's why that dynamic changed there.
And nevertheless, we tried to take a look at cases in March and April just to see if there was anything that was interesting.
Charlene Cecilia Couture was last seen in Rosenberg, Texas on March 1st, 2007. She's originally from Minnesota. She and another Minnesota woman were living with two men in Fort Bend County in 2007. The other woman returned to Minnesota, but Charlene vanished without a trace. Her disappearance was not reported to authorities until 2012. In the summer of 2012, investigators searched a rural property along the Brazos River, north of Rosenberg, Texas, for Charlene's body. They stated they have two male persons of interest in her presumed death. One of them is deceased. The other is incarcerated on unrelated charges. The search turned up no evidence, however, and little information is available in Charlene's case. Charlene Couture was 35 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and weighed 170 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She has tattoos on all of the fingers of her left hand, and a tattoo of the name Cruz on the back of her neck. Her case remains unsolved. Rebecca Noel Brommel was last seen at her mother's residence in Portland, Oregon on April 30th, 2007. She may have been sighted in the Eugene-Springfield area of Oregon in early May, but that has never been confirmed. In early May, a car associated with her was found 5 miles up a Weyerhaeuser service road between Deerhorn and Goodpasture roads in a rural area east of Springfield. There was no sign of Brommel at the scene. She has no relatives living in that area, and authorities don't know why she would go there. Rebecca Brommel was 26 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and weighed 160 pounds. She had brown hair and hazel eyes. She has the following tattoos: a Celtic knot on her lower back, a black line on both legs, a green tree on her back, the word lucky on her left leg, and the word girl on her right leg. Her nickname is Beck, and her case remains unsolved. Myung Kun Noah was last seen in San Bruno, California at approximately 7 o'clock p.m. on May 1st, 2007. He left his home in his black 2007 Lincoln Town Car, telling his 15-year-old son he was going to pick up a customer for his private car service, e-limousine services, which he ran out of his home. Noah did not say who he was picking up or where. He has never been heard from again, and his car has not been located. It did not have license plates at the time Noah went missing, but it did have a transportation number printed on the back bumper. Authorities consider Noah's disappearance suspicious, as he was not having any problems at the time of his disappearance and has no history of ever leaving without warning. A search of airport parking lots and a street-by-street search of San Bruno turned up no sign of his vehicle. Noah has 2 adult children by a previous marriage, in addition to a teenage son. He has not been in contact with any of his family members since May of 2007. There is concern for his safety. Myung Noah was 60 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, and weighed 165 pounds. He has black hair and brown eyes. His nickname is Mike. His case remains unsolved. It's just that according to what they say there, the way that it contradicts is, we should be looking in Canada or Florida. They're saying that he goes to these locations far, far away from where he's supposed to be, and that they think they've caught him in this one. Well, I did. I went looking in Maine and Canada and Florida. And you know what? I'm gonna give examples of one Canadian case and one Florida case during this time period where they're looking for him in California. Because if he's not there attending to the girlfriend, I don't think he's killing somebody right down the street. And if it's not John L. McGehee, or, the Lake Berryessa doe, I did have one other name there, but I think she's a runaway. It's Sierra Vihaliana Akeo. If you can find anything on her, I would be interested in reading it, because she's marked as missing during that time period in California, but I can't find anything. It's the little blonde girl, and there's just no record of her at all.
Time can often be the enemy of murder investigations. Leads go cold and a case can remain unsolved, sometimes for decades. But in some cases, time is what is needed for technology to advance, to bring about new leads. Technological advances in forensic science could help answer who brutally murdered 2 people in Clay County 12 years ago. Here's Katie Jeffries with tonight's Unsolved.
Old newspaper articles say neighbors remembered the silence that night because it was unusual for the Middleburg home, which was normally bustling with people. But when the roommate of Chelsea Roan and Matt Brumbaugh came home, he found a grisly scene in what investigators describe as not only a double murder, but an execution. It is one of only 4 unsolved homicide cases at the Clay County Sheriff's Office, but it was a cold and brutal crime. It was April 24th, 2007. Chelsea Roan was just 16 years old. Matt Brumbaugh was only 21. They and one other roommate lived at this home at 1723 Jean Court in Middleburg. Sometime between midnight and 2:30 in the morning, their lives ended.
Someone was either inside their home waiting on them or got to the home when they were there, went in and shot both of them.
Both were shot in the head at close range. Chelsea found near the door, Matt by an open safe. Detective Ram Schoonover with the Clay County Sheriff's Office is reinvestigating this case. He says there were drugs being sold from the home at the time.
It wasn't a secret to the people that were living out there. Chelsea was 16, but she had previously married. And prior to several weeks leading up to this, they had split up, and Matt Brumbaugh was a friend of both of them. So he took her in to live with him.
He emphasizes that the two were not romantically involved. The terrible scene was discovered by the roommate, but he didn't call police right away.
He went back out across the street, got a friend of his, and they both went back to the scene before calling 911 and started to clean up some of the evidence. Because it was a known drug house, they were trying to protect their friend's image.
So from the beginning, that posed a problem. Crucial evidence had been moved or cleaned. Investigators ruled out a murder-suicide, but the main question of motive remained. Was this a drug deal gone bad, or was it personal? Matt Brumbaugh's obituary says he was a soft-spoken and loving young man. Chelsea's friends described her to the Times-Union as sweet and kind. 2 young people that had their whole lives ahead of them.
They were involved in illegal activity, selling drugs, but did they need to be, deserve to be executed the way they were? No.
Detective Schoonover hopes that new technology could bring their killer to justice. It's called vacuum metal deposition. It's a powerful fingerprint detection method that can be used on evidence that's up to 2 decades old. And they have the shell casings and evidence from the scene that can be tested. But Detective Schoonover does believe that there are those who know more than what they told investigators in 2007. And after nearly 12 years, now could be the time to get that off their conscience.
You might have remembered something back then and didn't want to get involved. But now as, maybe you matured and got older and this has been with someone for that long and they just want to get it off their chest.
And justice can finally be served for the brutal execution of Matt Brumbaugh and Chelsea Roan. Investigators are hopeful that testing evidence with new technology could bring in more leads. But if you know anything that could help solve this double murder, please call the Clay County Sheriff's Office. Katie Jeffries with photographer Jeff Renfro for First Coast News, on your side.
Candace Shepley was 23 years old, the mother of 3 young children, when she mysteriously disappeared. It has been over a decade since she was last seen. investigators now suspecting she may have been murdered, although her body has never been recovered. Candace's youngest daughter, now 17, says a day doesn't pass where her mother is not on her mind. She says she wants answers, but most of all, she just wants her mom to come home. Can you help Candace's children get the answers they are searching for? Candace's last known whereabouts was in Surrey on April 1st, 2007, between 1 and 2 a.m. Her car, a 1995 green Pontiac Grand Am with BC license plate 695 KXD, was spotted in the area of 102 Avenue and 150th Street in Surrey earlier that night between 9:10 and 9:44 p.m. Homicide detectives say 10 days later, her Grand Am was found abandoned near the Renfrew SkyTrain station in Vancouver. In October of 2018, the investigation took a strange turn. A private investigator uncovered a student loan taken out in her name 5 years after she vanished. But that discovery never led to any conclusions. Her family is doing everything they possibly can. They've created a social media page on Facebook appealing for witnesses and information. The Facebook page also serves as an online avenue where friends and family share how deeply they miss her. Candace's parents and kids still have a void in their hearts and so many unanswered questions. iHit says a person of interest who they believe may have information about her disappearance died in prison. He was serving time for an unrelated manslaughter conviction. Anyone with information on this case, no matter how small it may be, is encouraged to call police. Or if you wish to remain anonymous, contact Metro Vancouver Crime Stoppers at solvecrime.ca or call 1-800-222-8477.
I went to work looking at a lot of unsolved homicides and other missing persons cases around the country for 2007 just to see if I could find anything that matched this killer. And if Meg was right, I wondered if his tastes in victims might have changed. So I looked at specific cases along the way that might seem a little odd.
Jasmine Sue Haslog was last seen at approximately 12 o'clock p.m. on June 17, 2007 in Russellville, Missouri. She was scheduled to pick up her children at 12:30 p.m. the following day from their father's residence in Bland, Missouri, but never arrived. Her green 1996 Toyota was found abandoned on June 20th in Mokane, Missouri, across the Missouri River. This was the opposite direction from the route Haslog would have taken to pick up her children. The license plate and battery had been removed from the vehicle, which had nothing in it. Haslog's mother filed a missing persons report on June 21st, 4 days after she was last seen. Haslog's boyfriend was the last person to see her. He originally stated he last saw her when she left Russellville to get her children, then changed his story and stated she dropped him off at a Walmart store. The boyfriend was incarcerated on drug charges after Haslog disappeared. Haslog herself was involved with drugs prior to her disappearance and was due to appear in court on July 18, 2007 on charges of possessing materials to make methamphetamine and intent to distribute for marijuana, both felonies. She missed her court date. She did not have a criminal record prior to these charges. Authorities believe foul play was involved in Haslog's disappearance. They think her case may be drug-related. Jasmine Haslog was 31 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, and weighed 125 pounds. She has blondish brown hair and hazel eyes. Her ears are pierced, and she has burn scars on both forearms. Her case remains unsolved.
Haley Brianne Colwell and her mother, Kimberly Witten, were last seen on June 21, 2007. They resided in a log cabin on a 40-acre property. The driveway leading up to the residence has 2 locked gates, and as a result, the cabin can only be reached on foot. The day she went missing, Kimberly went to her job at Cloverdale Manor Nursing Home in Scottsboro, Alabama, to pick up some papers. She called a friend on the way back home in Section, Alabama, but they were unable to talk because the connection was bad. Kimberly promised to call her friend back in 5 minutes, but she never did. Kimberly's coworkers reported her disappearance on June 28, a week after she was last seen. Authorities interviewed her husband, who was also Haley's stepfather. He stated that Kimberly and Haley left the residence in a white Ford van or truck with Alabama license plates shortly after Kimberly arrived home. He said he gave his wife $20,000 in cash, and he never saw them again. He stated they may have gone to Montana. They had been married for 8 years prior to her disappearance. The husband has a criminal record, convicted on charges of receiving stolen property in 1988 and 1999
1991. After authorities searched his property for evidence in his wife and stepdaughter's disappearance, they arrested him on weapons charges. There were guns found on his property, and due to his criminal history, he was not legally permitted to own or possess them. In September of 2007, he pled guilty to being a felon in possession of firearms and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The typical sentence given for those charges is between 12 and 18 months, but the judge elected to sentence him to the maximum term due to the danger that he was believed to pose to the community, and the judge described him as the most dangerous defendant she had seen in her judicial career. The judge heard witnesses testify that he had bragged about having murdered 3 people, discussed body disposal and removing trace evidence, and had threatened to kill other individuals, including his mother-in-law and the judge who placed his 11-year-old son in foster care after Kimberly and Haley's disappearances. He is considered a suspect in Kimberly and Haley's case, although he's never confessed to harming them. Authorities stated they found blood in one of his pickup trucks and on a hatchet handle, but the source of the blood was never revealed. His first wife disappeared in late 1997. At the time, he said that she, like Kimberly and Haley, had simply left. He said that she went out to breakfast one day and never came back. She was found beaten and stabbed to death and buried in a shallow grave in DeKalb County, Alabama, 6 weeks later, in January of 1998. Kimberly had met her husband through a personals ad. They got married about a year after the other woman's death, after only 4 to 6 months of dating. It's unclear whether she knew that his previous wife had been murdered or that he was a prime suspect. While in jail on the gun charges, the husband allegedly told a cellmate that he did not kill Michelle, but he knew who did, and he had killed that person. In December 2014, a little less than a year before he was supposed to be released from federal prison, he was indicted for her murder. He was found guilty in September of 2015, and he was sentenced to life in prison. It's uncharacteristic of Kimberly and Haley to leave for an extended period of time without telling anyone. Kimberly had worked at the nursing home for 7 years prior to her disappearance. The only time she ever missed work was to take Haley on a school trip. There were no known problems in Kimberly's marriage in 2007, and Kimberly had not told anyone that her husband had been mistreating her. He has not faced any charges related to their disappearances. Kimberly and her daughter may have traveled to Montana after they went missing, but investigators suspect foul play was involved in their cases. Haley was a 5th grade student at Macedonia School at the time she went missing. Haley Colwell was 11 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and weighed 110 pounds. She had blonde hair and brown eyes. Kimberly Witten was 36 years old, 5 foot 9 inches tall, and weighed 250 pounds. She had brown hair and brown eyes. Their cases remain unsolved.
Grand Junction is situated on the western slope of Colorado, and it's very mountainous and beautiful.
I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but one thing is apparent. It is very tough terrain to search in.
There are hundreds of thousands of places where you could hide a body and we might never find it.
I'm Frank Bergfeld. I'm the father of Paige Meredith Bergfeld. She's the mother of 3 children.
My sister did not return from a meeting she had with a previous husband of hers.
Paige was within 5 miles of the house here in Grand Junction and disappeared.
My sister was missing.
You start asking, missing? What do you mean missing?
My name is Pete Hautzinger. I'm the district attorney for Mesa County, Colorado. We're looking at somebody who has disappeared. We don't know why.
I said, you're in the midst of a crime. This is not someone who would run off. Paige would have never abandoned her children.
Loves her kids. Appears to be a typical divorced mom. Lives in a nice house in one of the nicer neighborhoods in Grand Junction.
11825. They found her car abandoned in a parking lot and lit on fire a couple days after she went missing. This led investigators to believe that there was foul play involved. We search fields, national parks, mountains, and I am committed to search for her until we find her and bring her home.
Then we started finding out some things that really pretty much changed everything.
First, you find out Paige is missing, and then within a couple of days, we started finding out about this other life that we didn't know about.
You start hearing things about your own daughter that you didn't know about.
We got more details about the extent of Paige's business and the type of person she was and the type of lifestyle she led.
after Jess was born. She had told me that she wasn't doing it anymore.
She kept all these secrets from her friends and family.
She said she had been making $400,000 a year doing it, and she didn't need to do it anymore.
She had a couple things on her computer.
I said, okay, well, that certainly puts a different twist on this investigation.
Where is my girl? She may be a 34-year-old woman, a mother of 3 children, but to me, she's just my little girl.
9 years and 2 trials later, finally a guilty verdict in the murder of a Grand Junction mother, Paige Bergfeld.
The man who kidnapped her and killed her heard just about an hour ago he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Lester Jones was a customer of Bergfeld's escort business.
ABC producer Carol McKinley has been following this trial. And Carol, it was standing room only in the gallery.
Yeah, Molly, it was so tense in there. You have to have lived through these 2 trials to understand what this all came down to, and here in the Christmas season as well. You had the walls lined with investigators who were maligned and criticized throughout 2 trials, wondering if they were going to get justice for Paige Bergfeld. All of the people who searched for her, her friends, and of course Lester Ralph Jones' family, the man who was found guilty, his wife was in there, his sisters, they were there for the entire first 2 trials. And apparently they took his wife, who stood behind him through all of this, through all of the talk about prostitutes and pornography. They put a coat over her head and took her to the elevator so reporters couldn't ask her any questions.
Well, Carol, can you tell us about the jury's demeanor today?
Well, they came in and they were very stoic. Now, then, during the first trial, which happened pretty much the entire month of August and into September, those jurors were deadlocked. Nothing happened with that one because they couldn't decide. And they came and talked to the media after they told everyone they couldn't make a decision. This jury was different. 7 men, 5 women came in. They were very stoic, would not look at Jones, and that was the first clue to the people in the gallery, Molly and Adam, that this was going to be guilty.
Yeah, they didn't look at him. What about Bergfeld's family today? How are they?
Well, that's a great question, Molly. I just got off the phone with Frank Bergfeld, and he remembers those dry, hot, 100-degree days searching for his daughter. I mean, he stayed in Grand Junction for months looking for her. She wasn't found, of course, till 2012, but I just got off the phone with him, and he said he was not in the courtroom because they wanted to be with Paige Bergfeld's 3 children who are in Seattle. He wanted to be with them instead of being in the courtroom. And so he got to see his grandchildren, what he has left of his daughter. And what he said was, you know, it's been a long road, but I finally feel like I've got justice for my daughter.
All right, a terrible situation for everyone involved. Thank you so much, ABC producer Carol McKinley, covering that trial for us today.
Because, see, I had liked him for this weird Cleveland thing that happened in August where, you know, the crazy neighbor is convicted of it, but he swears he didn't do it. And he's also pretty out there. So I don't really know how that all went forward anyway. That's the murder of this woman, Gwen. She was found strangled and her house was burned. That's what I was looking at it for during this time, by the way. It was like fires everywhere I was looking. There was a weird case down in Florida. There was a couple down there, and there's this other couple up in Mifflin County. But I looked, there's these 2 pairs that aren't really reported. So there's one pair, these 2 17-year-old boys, they go missing down in Florida. Nothing. There's nothing available about them at all. And then there's a pair in Connecticut. So it's Guadalupe Ramirez that's missing with her like 3 or 4-year-old kid. And they just gone in the night. But it fits into this Cleveland, Ohio time frame. So, you know, I looked at those. But the thing about those cases is they just didn't really make a paper trail, which is kind of discouraging in some ways. And like the Mifflin case, like they have a suspect and it all makes sense to me. And like seeing the site, like seeing like where it happened, it doesn't really seem like him, but you know, learn not to rule that out. And again, 2007 feels like this big bust. So then the only other thing about 2007 that was like hopefully a learning experience was that he didn't seem to be where other people thought he was, which leads me back to this whole California thing. Like I understand that like that's what we're supposed to be looking at. I looked at stuff elsewhere during that time, and the reason I looked at stuff elsewhere is because if we think he's in California, then it's highly unlikely he's in California for the whole time, or at least for the hotspot time. Maybe he's in Oregon. Maybe he is in Pennsylvania. Maybe I don't know where, There was this one case I really liked him for the Joey Offit case. And that one is not right for the timeline, but I still like him for that case in a way.
Lori Virginia Haley was last seen in Longview, Washington, sometime in early July 2007. She was divorced at the time of her disappearance and staying in hotels in Kelso, Longview, and Woodland, Washington. She had previously lived in this area for many years. Haley's green 1999 Ford Windstar with a Washington license plate may have been seen in her old neighborhood around the time of her disappearance. The van was found in Spokane, Washington on July 9th. Authorities are unsure what caused Haley's disappearance, but they believe foul play may be involved. Lori Haley was 54 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and weighed around 115 pounds. She has brown hair and blue eyes. Her case remains unsolved.
It's been almost a decade since the Jefferson County woman went missing. Her home on fire claimed the life of her son. She was nowhere to be found. Joey Offit's been missing officially since July of 2007. Tonight, state police are asking for your help.
Bridget McClure spoke with police and her family today and has the latest. Bridget.
Jen and Marty, Joey Offit's family says she was a very kind-hearted person, a religious woman, and that most of all, she loved being a mother. And even though it's been 9 years since her disappearance, they still believe that someone, somewhere, has the answers. 9 years ago, this parking lot on Dr. Fugate Drive in Sykesville was where Joey Offit's house sat. Just 6 months after moving to the area, Offit's house went up in flames on July 12, 2007.
If she lived in Virginia or, if we all lived in Pennsylvania, that sort of thing, that perhaps we could, do more in the community to keep her face out there.
The remains of her 6-week-old son were found inside, but police say the baby died before the fire. That fire ruled arson, and Offit was nowhere to be found.
Currently, some new information had come out in reference to the victim in this case. Joey Offit was declared legally dead. That was the family had taken care of that for some reasons for her children. But currently, the investigation is very active, same as it was in July when it started.
4 days later, police found Offit's car in State College at her old apartment. Her other 2 children were not home when the fire broke out and have been living with family since their mother disappeared.
Life goes on, unfortunately, but there's still a big gaping hole where their mother's presence once was.
Over the past 9 years, investigators have followed countless leads, but there's been no solid evidence.
We strongly believe that likely she was murdered and that the scene of the crime was positioned in a way that would make it look like that she committed the crime and then fled.
She was just 33 years old. Her whereabouts still remain a mystery.
Currently, there's a $25,000 reward for the resolution of this case.
That reward is being offered by the family. Offit is described as a petite woman, about 5'3". If anyone has information, you're asked to call state police in Punxsutawney. Reporting live, Bridget McClure, 6 News.
James Laurie was last seen in Willoughby, Ohio on July 15, 2007. His landlord stated he moved out that day and said he was moving to Maine. His family reported him missing after a year had passed without him getting in touch with them. They didn't file a report earlier because James traveled internationally in his work as a photographer and would frequently drop out of sight for long periods of time without warning. He's never been heard from again. Police in Willoughby found out that Lincoln County Sheriff's Office in Maine had checked Laurie's registration plate several times in August and September 2007. The missing persons investigation was transferred to Maine as a result. In August 2007, Lincoln County Sheriff's officials discovered James's silver 1996 Pontiac Firebird with Ohio plates in a parking lot off Route 96 in the Ocean Point area of East Boothbay, Maine. Local residents said the car had been there most of the summer. Several of James' personal belongings were in the vehicle. It was towed from that location in October and placed in storage. The circumstances of Laurie's case are unclear. Maine police are still handling the investigation. James Laurie was 59 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, and weighed 180 pounds. He has brown hair and blue eyes. His case remains unsolved. Lisa Ann Green left her apartment in Tuscaloosa, Alabama at 5 o'clock p.m. on July 27, 2007. She was driving a silver 2000 Dodge Ram extended cab pickup truck with an Alabama license plate. Later that day, she went to a local lounge to discuss a planned fundraiser with a friend. She only stayed about 10 minutes. She called her father at 8:20 p.m. to say she was on her way to pick up her son, but she never arrived. On August 4th, an off-duty police officer found Green's truck abandoned at the Food World grocery store in the 4400 block of University Boulevard East in Cottondale, Alabama. Surveillance cameras at the time showed Green making a purchase at the store at 9:30 p.m. on the day she vanished. She exited the store without incident and has never been heard from again. All of Green's belongings, including her clothing and money, were left behind. It's uncharacteristic of Green to leave without warning or to be out of touch with her family. She had worked in the telemarketing and recruiting departments at Randall Riley Publishing Company for almost 2 years prior to her disappearance. She's described as a reliable employee who was never late or absent. She requested vacation time from work shortly before she disappeared. She planned to travel to Panama with her son in August. Her son's father had died when the boy was young. Green is described as a devoted parent. Her son's grandmother became his legal guardian after Green disappeared. Lisa Green was 44 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and 109 pounds. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. Her case remains unsolved.
When a child goes missing, it can shake a community to its core. The people of Trois-Rivières, Quebec, know that all too well. They spent a hot summer day continuing their desperate search for Cédrica Provencher. The 9-year-old has been missing since Tuesday. Lynn Robson has our story tonight.
Every box is overturned. Every dark space examined. Trois-Rivières is searching high and low for Cédrica Provencher. It's our duty as citizens to help find a missing child, says Fanny Lamarche. Cédrica Provencher, last seen Tuesday on her bike looking for a lost black dog. Thing is, she doesn't own a dog. She's not shy, says her father. She would help a stranger with a missing pet. And now she is missing. Only her bike has been found behind a dumpster. This quiet town has been transformed partly by its sense of fear and partly out of a sense of compassion. Today, more than 320 volunteers showed up despite temperatures exceeding 34 degrees. They are determined to find something, anything, that will lead to the discovery of Cédrica Provencher's whereabouts. Among the searchers, Bernard Ritchie and 10 other employees of a local aluminum manufacturer. They took a day without pay to comb the streets near the Provencher's home.
I find it very difficult because if it was my child, I know what parents are thinking about.
They show the girl's photo and talk to everyone. Then, perhaps a shred of information. A man reports a suspicious stranger in a nearby park. Ritchie phones it in. You never know what might help.
There could be any possibility.
Police refuse to speculate about what happened, but this young woman, identified only as Catherine, says that 13 days ago a stranger tried to abduct her. She escaped, but believes there may be a link to Cédrica Provencher's disappearance. As fear mounts, so does money for a reward. Already, local companies and individuals have donated thousands of dollars. It's extraordinary. People are very generous, says Martin Provencher. But it's more than 48 hours now since Cédrica Provencher vanished into thin air.
The best outcome should be that we find the girl in maybe in not good shape, but alive.
And then the search resumes. One town united in its hunt for a lost little girl. Lynn Robson, CBC News, Trois-Rivières, Quebec.
Police officers spent the day searching the woods near Trois-Rivières today. The remains of 9-year-old Cédrica Provencher were found there on Friday. She'd been missing since 2007. And as Rob Lurie reports, the family had never given up hope.
As police continue to comb the woods where Cédrica's remains were found, feet away, well-wishers add to the makeshift shrine. Flowers, teddy bears, even a child-sized Christmas tree.
It's just a symbol of the innocence that Cédrica was.
It's not easy because I have children and it's very triste.
They've been holding out something of hope since 2007, and now they know that they can move on with the mourning period, and so that is a very small positive in this whole thing. When Cedrica first went missing back in July 31st, 2007, her bike was found near some garbage bins. Now, back at that time, police said that all they could say was that there was a red Acura involved in the disappearance. In spite of that, there has never been any arrests made in the case. And all police will say for now is that they are hoping to make an arrest soon.
When you got to the scene, what details were you given?
There's a woman in there, so 2 firefighters actually ran inside to try to rescue her.
They came across Mrs. Bewley's body down on the ground.
She was on her back. She was obviously deceased. There was no soot or smoke in her lungs.
She was dead before the fire. Someone had piled combustible materials on her and ignited them.
I was in shock. I just didn't want to believe it.
Her boyfriend did show up at the scene. That was a little peculiar. Her body hadn't even been removed yet.
I didn't feel she knew him well enough, but she trusted him.
I think he charmed her. He acted like he was so helpful.
What kind of person did you think was capable of killing her and then setting her body on fire?
It has to be a monster.
Well, he's a sociopath.
From Cleveland.gov by Corey Schaefer on January 9th, 2017. Cleveland, Ohio. What was set to be the first day of trial for a Fairview Park man accused of killing his neighbor and burning down her home devolved into accusations of a government conspiracy against him involving bugged clothing. Timothy Sheline, who is charged with aggravated murder and arson in the 2007 killing of Gwendolyn Bewley, accused Cuyahoga County Judge Carolyn Friedland, prosecutors, and police of planting microphones in his clothing to record his conversations with his retained lawyer, Michael Chiselka. "This is a kangaroo court," Sheline proclaimed. "This isn't a court of law. There can't be any justice here." The hearing ended when Judge Carolyn Friedland allowed Chiselka to remove himself from Sheline's defense. The judge also recused herself because Sheline accused her of being in on the conspiracy, essentially throwing the case that has dragged on for 2 years back to square one. "I'm going to sue you for everything you've got," Sheline told Chiselka as a deputy led him out of the court in handcuffs. Monday's outburst was the latest wrinkle in a case mired in pretrial proceedings since a grand jury indicted Sheline in December of 2014 in the 2007 killing. Bewley's body was found with strangle wounds inside her burning home on West 220th Street. Sheline, who lived next door to Bewley, was arrested a few weeks later driving her car and in possession of her credit cards. He maintained that he had Bewley's permission to use the items, but pleaded no contest to theft-related felony charges in 2008. He never showed up in court for sentencing and was on the lam for months until he checked himself into Fairview Hospital in January 2009 after he saw a story about his case on Cleveland.com, police said. A judge there sentenced him to 3.5 years in prison. 7 years after Bewley's death, investigators obtained new evidence using technology that wasn't available at the time of the fire to charge him in Bewley's death. Prosecutors alleged that he committed financial fraud in Bewley's name and killed her to keep her from going to police. He set fire to her home to conceal the killing. After nearly 2 years of pretrial hearings, including handwritten motions that Sheline filed from jail to get his previous attorneys removed from the case, Sheline was set to go to trial in December. 2 days into jury selection, Sheline came forward to Chiselka with a new alibi that he promised would absolve him of the charges if properly investigated. His lawyers convinced Friedland to dismiss the jurors and delay the trial while he looked into the claim. The trial was set to begin with jury selection again Monday with a new batch of potential jurors. Sheline's rant began as soon as he was led into the courtroom, dressed in his orange Cuyahoga County Jail jumpsuit instead of civilian clothing that defendants wear for trial. "Oh, so you're not going to talk to me?" the shaggy-haired Sheline blurted to Chiselka, who sat motionless at the defense table. A black and yellow striped necktie necktie that Chiselka had bought for Sheline sat on the table. Sheline told Friedland that Chiselka had not showed up to a scheduled meeting last week. She asked why Sheline was not dressed in regular clothes. "You people put microphones in my clothes, so I couldn't talk to my attorney," Sheline said. Sheline went on to accuse prosecutors of monitoring conversations with Chiselka and a Fairview Park police officer of recording conversations in the courtroom for other witnesses. "No one has put hearing devices in your clothing," Friedland said, "unless perhaps it was the CIA." Sheline then directed his comments back to Chiselka and asked if Chiselka did not come to see him in jail because of the hidden microphones. Chiselka said he had come to see him and that he had repeatedly asked Sheline to stop talking to his family. "You only have 2 words to say to me?" Chiselka told Sheline at the defense table. "You remember what you told me?" Sheline replied, "Oh, I have no intention of firing you. Then they'll snap you up and use you as a witness against me." Chiselka, who had filed a motion just before the hearing to remove himself from the case, told Friedland that he had overheard Sheline say to his relative that his main goal was to ruin Chiselka and his license, and that he could no longer act in Sheline's best interest. Sheline argued that he had already paid Chiselka through the duration of the trial and couldn't afford a new lawyer. "You're going to give me some new schlep who's looking into a free appointed case," Sheline told Friedland, calling public defenders public pretenders. Friedland pointed out that none of Sheline's previous court-appointed defense attorneys were public defenders. At the end of the hearing, Sheline threw his arms up to his head and clenched his hands. "She's a part of it," Sheline said of Friedland. "You're all part of it." After the hearing, Chiselka told Cleveland.com that he'd spent thousands of hours working to get the case against Sheline dismissed and preparing for trial. "If there was a way to bring him home, I would have figured it out," Chiselka said. Sheline's case will be sent back to presiding and administrative judge John J. Russo, who will assign the case to a new judge and appoint a new attorney to represent Sheline. Sheline's criminal history dates back to the 1990s, with convictions for theft, motor vehicle theft, vandalism, assault, forgery, and assault on a police officer that spread from Toledo to Colorado and back to Toledo. Sheline and the ACLU sued the Colorado prison systems while he was incarcerated in 2005. Sheline, an Orthodox Jew at the time, said the prisons denied his religious liberty by revoking his kosher diet as punishment for taking butter and salad dressing for the prison's dining hall. The prison system agreed to resume giving Sheline his kosher meals. Gilbert L. Ungot was last seen on September 7, 2007, in Gamble, Alaska, around 4 p.m. Few details are available in his case. Gilbert Ungot was 43 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, and weighed 195 pounds. He has black hair and brown eyes. His case remains unsolved. Ashley Elizabeth Dodges was last seen on September 13, 2007, in Bishop, California. Few details are available in her case. Ashley Dodges was 17 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, and weighed 130 pounds. She had brown hair and brown eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Lisa Lee Chandler was last seen at her home in the 5500 block of Highway 34 North in Wolf City, Texas, at 5 o'clock p.m. on September 23, 2007. She's never been heard from again. Her daughter became concerned as she was unable to reach her and drove to Chandler's home to investigate. The house was deserted, Chandler's vehicle was parked in the driveway, and her dog was running loose in the yard. The doors to the house were all unlocked, the windows were open, and Chandler's belongings, including her purse and cigarettes, were left behind. Dogs tracked Chandler's scent south along the highway for 5 miles before they lost the trail. She may have been picked up by a passing motorist. Foul play is possible in Chandler's case, as it is uncharacteristic of her to disappear completely without warning. Some of her associates may have been involved with drugs, but it's unclear whether drugs are a factor in her case. She had been living in her house for 20 years prior to her disappearance. Lisa Chandler was 5 feet 6 inches tall. She weighed 140 pounds. She had brown hair and hazel eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Corey Dion Bobo was last seen in the vicinity of West 24th Street in Little Rock, Arkansas at 8 o'clock a.m. on November 1st, 2007. He was driving a black 1998 Mercedes-Benz 320 with an Arkansas plate number. He was supposed to go to a car auction that morning, but he never arrived and has never been heard from again. A few days later, Bobo's car was found abandoned in a field in St. Francis County, Arkansas, with his blood inside. Foul play is suspected in Bobo's disappearance. He left behind a young daughter. Corey Bobo was 25 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed 165 pounds. He had black hair and brown eyes. He had a tattoo of clown mask on his left arm and a tattoo of angels and clouds on his right arm. His case remains unsolved. Brandy Lauren Christensen was last seen in Butte Silver, Bow County, Montana on November 2nd, 2007. She's never been heard from again. A week after her disappearance, her blue 1991 Toyota Tercel with a Montana license plate was found on Delmo Lake Road in Homestake Pass. It was undamaged with no signs of foul play, and women's clothing was in the back seat. There were no tire tracks in the snow around the vehicle, indicating it had been parked there for several days. Authorities were unable to search the area at the time due to bad weather. When they finally were able to conduct a search in May of 2008, they found no clues as to Christensen's whereabouts. Christensen was a student at Montana Tech at the time of her disappearance. She lived in Butte, Montana, and frequently changed residences. She has 3 children, and she enjoys rock climbing. She had a restraining order against her former live-in boyfriend at the time she went missing, but he was not named as a suspect in her disappearance. It is uncharacteristic of Christensen to leave without warning. Brandy Christensen was 46 years old, 5 feet 1 inches tall, and weighed 102 pounds. She has brown hair and blue eyes. Her case remains unsolved. Da Ming Chu was reported missing by his wife on November 5, 2007, by 2 a.m. after he did not return from a hike at Alele Summit in Lane County at Blue River, Oregon. He has never been seen or heard from again. His vehicle, a white 2003 Chevy Impala with Oregon license plate, was found at the Olali trailhead. It's possible he was wearing a black jacket when he went missing. Da Ming Chu was 63 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and weighed 150 pounds. He had black hair and brown eyes. His case remains unsolved.
Mandy Stokes disappeared on Sunday, November 25th, 2007. When a person disappears without a trace, often the most critical information is hidden in their actions and words from the days before they vanished. Mandy Stokes' last known whereabouts may hold the clues to what happened to her. Mandy Stokes, a pint-sized, lively grad student, leaves the apartment she shares with her brother to run some errands.
She was in school, she had money in the bank, she had a great boyfriend. To me, she had a good life and she seemed happy.
But Mandy never returns.
You know, you have this horrible feeling, oh my God, where's my daughter?
Mandy's family and friends rush to California to search for her and are shocked at what they find.
The crowd that he introduced Mandy to weren't nice people.
My first thought is, let's follow this guy and bust in his apartment and see if she's there.
Her loved ones are left to ponder troubling possibilities.
You start thinking all this stuff that could have happened. Amnesia, falling, kidnapped.
It's the most awful thing, not to know where someone is.
Investigators take on a harrowing case that they know will shake a family to its core.
And what you try to do with the family is to tell them to hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst.
So the last pair that I examined in 2007 is it's not a pair technically on paper, but it's a pair. So there's this kid in like October, November, I don't know when, but sometime in there. October 1st, 2007 is the date that it's listed as the taking. It's a little kid, it's like a 1-year-old, under 1, in Daniel Charley, Kahle, up in New Jersey. So New Jersey comes back up in 2009, and what's interesting about Daniel's case is, you start drilling down, going through the paperwork, it's not just Daniel. It seems to also be his mom, Julia. So a J missing around that time in 2007. Maybe that's why he was looking for Jalek and Justin. Maybe it wasn't some of these other cases. Maybe it was Julia and Daniel. But, and this may not be the case. These people may have run away. They may have made a new life. They may have done whatever. But as far as Namus is concerned and the New Jersey State Police are concerned, Julia and Daniel are missing. I don't know how hard they work to close that and clear the paperwork. I don't know if she's got felony warrants. I can't really tell much about her. I can't seem to find that Julia alive. And I've looked for her. I'm usually pretty good at hunting these people down. But in this case, nothing. As I'm like expanding out on the particular interest area, what I do is I take a location, and then, I just gradually expand the dates and the location until I'm looking at all of it. So, this is in the initial, I expand out. Because, sometimes people don't get reported missing the day they go missing. You'll get a date of last contact versus a report date. So that's why I do that. Because, I'm looking for, someone it says they're missing May 20th, but in reality, the date of last contact for them is, buried in the notes. And it says, oh, they were last talked to on April 2nd. So there's 6 weeks in there. With camping, we find that. Because someone will go camping on July 15th or July 7th, and they're supposed to be met back up with their friends and whatnot on August 1st. Completely reasonable, camping for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. They got to check in there somewhere or whatever. Nobody realizes till August 2nd that they didn't show up for August 1st. So you have to start, sometimes the time period can be larger. We have that example up in Canada this year in 2007. When I was expanding the search parameters of that California stuff, I started including Texas, and I got all the way over to Missouri. And, I slowly inched my way up time-wise, and I got to May 15th. It got real weird for a second because I wasn't looking for anything particular. I was just looking for this time frame of April 25th or 6th through, I said, May 15th. I was just looking to see who had been reported missing. And I came up with, I think there was 18 missing persons cases in my target area. And on the top left, it says that in Breckenridge, Texas, that Alvin Israel had gone missing. And I was like, that's interesting. That was on May 15th, 07. Well, the next person underneath him on May 14th, 07, was Andrew Keys over in St. Louis County, Missouri. But if you looked at it on my printout, that was the first two names that popped. I thought it was creepy that Alvin Israel and Andrew Keys are still missing. Doesn't really have anything to do with our case, I don't think. But I looked at those two, I was like, what? So Jerry Whaley is the other case that I talked about in this conversation that you were like, don't throw me off there.
Oh, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So we talked about Jeremy Burt. So there's this case, Jerry Whaley. He's out in Missouri.
Right,
now,
and I remember this case too.
He ended up on my radar. Here's why. Because his date, which is depending on which version of the numbers we believe as far as dates go, his date coincides with Justin Gaines. I don't think this guy had anything to do with Justin Gaines, and I think that your explanation is probably the correct one. But I did look around for J names that were missing. Now here, what's interesting about him, Whaley goes missing from a motel, and his car is found at a park in Franklin County, Missouri. So there's some space there. But this sort of illuminated some other things about this case for me. One is, on November 28th, I believe, which was Thanksgiving travel time, there's a luggage cart rental in Cleveland, Ohio that doesn't match anything else.
Right. It's a $3. It's a $3 charge on the FBI timeline.
Right. It's on the FBI timeline. You've mentioned it to me multiple times. I've looked for different things around that. I actually have some stuff I had poked my head into in Cleveland that doesn't seem to have anything to do with him because it doesn't match that time. But, I did look around, but that's sort of proof that a lot of what we're looking at here is maybe not going to be the whole story.
Oh, yeah, no question. I mean, he, even if it were they didn't put the card through until the next day or whatever, it doesn't add up because in theory, he's supposed to be in Anchorage at that point. In fact, he's supposed to be in Anchorage until he flies from Anchorage to Seattle on December 4th. Now, I have entertained the thought that he may have not returned to Anchorage after he initially was supposed to have left. And he may have been driving around in the United States most of November. And then he, went to Seattle, not having flown there from Anchorage, and continued on the way it's laid out otherwise.
And just for the sake of the story, continuity, and clarity, I'm going to use Meg's audio that she's given me to keep a clear head of 2007 and how the travel after the killer's move worked so that you can hear what I was working with.
It would be interesting to know, when did he stop working before he got ready to pack everything up and move? When did he stop paying rent and vacate the premises he was living on? Those would all be like important things to know to kind of gauge what might have happened before he packed up his truck and drove through Canada to Alaska. At first glance, it seems like this move would make things really easy because traveling around the United States is, you can do it relatively untracked. When you get into going through Canada to get to Alaska, or you leave Alaska, drive through Canada, and enter the United States, you have to go through the border. And getting into the United States, there's always going to be a record, or there should be a record. Traveling from Washington to Oregon or whatever, you don't have to go through any sort of border control. And you don't have to go through customs if you fly from Alaska into the United States or from the United States into Alaska. It does appear that at least some of his flight records were obtained from the actual airline carrier. The extent to which he could have gotten around something like that, I'm not entirely sure because I don't know all the avenues that were taken to gather the record. I know that some places that he flew, as indicated on the FBI timeline, they were notated as just his financial records or an email confirmation. I think they did subpoena Alaska Air and the most common airlines he would have taken to fly. It's debatable how many additional flights he could have taken from Anchorage to anywhere in the United States without a trace. I'm actually unsure of how easy it would be to just sort of walk into the airport and buy an airplane ticket with cash. I assume you could probably still do that, but you are still going to have to provide an ID. Don't think we can rely 100% on the FBI timeline with regard to his travels. However, I do think it gives some interesting information. I've kept in mind the entire time that while they did get his records from official sources, a lot of them aren't his. Just because those records exist to prove one thing don't necessarily mean that there wasn't some other way he could have been doing things they just couldn't track down. Of course, they may have all of that stuff and they just haven't released it yet. For our investigative purposes, it's much harder to track that. You would think that this distance that he's putting himself in Alaska away from the lower 48 United States, and that means he couldn't have done it if, it happened in the lower 48 during that time period. Almost immediately, we see that in April, so he entered Alaska by vehicle in Alcan, Alaska on March 9th. 2007. And then by April 24th, 2007, we have him flying out of Anchorage to Oakland, California. So it wasn't really much of an investigative break to know that he has now distanced himself from his former stomping ground, and we're going to be able to find him when he is traveling. Now we have him in Alaska, flying back for legitimate reasons. It's just as confusing as ever. In order to sort of put 2007 together, I went back to 2006. I noticed that according to the FBI timeline, he took a flight from Seattle to Anchorage November 8th, 2006, and he returned on November 13th, 2006. At that time, it's possible that he took his dog to Anchorage. As he explained at some point when he was speaking with investigators, I believe they had 3 pugs. 1 was his and 2 were his girlfriend's. So him possibly taking his dog gives him a little bit of freedom, because when he initially moved to Alaska, his daughter he couldn't take her to Alaska without, I guess, going back to court. I'm not really sure. They didn't really get into that, but my understanding was that in order to sort of avoid the legal conflict, they didn't go back to court and he went to Alaska, just him, for a little bit. So the last thing that I believe that I have access to that he was doing on November 13th, 2006, he flew back from Anchorage, Alaska to Seattle, Washington, having most likely left his pet dog in Alaska with the other dogs, and he now has really no immediate responsibilities. The next thing that we have him doing that's documented in some way, on January 13th, 2007, a ticket for Israel Keys is purchased to fly to Vegas on February 5th, 2007, and to return to Seattle February 8th. There is a name beside of his that's redacted, so just assuming that he went with his girlfriend to Vegas. So after we have him returning from Anchorage, Alaska, I will make a note that it does appear that he could be accounted for from January 31st on up until he leaves for Vegas. There's a plane ticket indicated to a redacted person. It doesn't say anything about them being together, but for the purposes of sort of putting things in order, it looks like a flight from Anchorage to Seattle occurred on January 31st, 2007. From Seattle, two people flew to Las Vegas, and then Keys flew back to Seattle, and the other person flew back to Anchorage, both on February 8th. Depending on sort of what else we can get out of, when he possibly stopped paying rent, or if somebody could say, oh yeah, he moved out of his rental in Nia Bay when he was moving to Alaska on this date, he could have possibly been unaccounted for from November 13th until January 31st. It is entirely possible that he was just living his normal life and there was no reason that there should be any sort of record, but even that is weird. You pay bills and you leave a trail, even when you are just living your normal life. Those types of things may be available somewhere, but I'm simply working with what I have available. So that brings us up to Keys flying back to Seattle on February 8th, 2007, while his traveling companion continues on from Seattle to Anchorage. And we really have no idea what Keys is up to from that point up until March 5th, 2007, where it's documented that Keys had a motel reservation in Cache Creek, British Columbia. That's followed by March the 7th reservation at a lodge in Watson Lake, Yukon Territory. On March the 8th, there's a motel reservation in Destruction Bay, Yukon Territory. And again on March 8th, there's a motel reservation in Teslin, Yukon Territory. It does look like that he received a credit or a refund for the Yukon Motel and Restaurant in Teslin. So he must have made a couple of reservations without being aware of how far he would get or something to that effect. And so it doesn't look like he ended up staying there. According to Keys' financials, he received a credit from the Home Depot on March 15th, 2007. In theory, that places him in Anchorage, Alaska. I've looked really hard at this particular area of time in Keys' life for quite a while now, actually. Here's my line of thinking. He makes a conscious decision to move to Alaska following his girlfriend. I believe she lived there for possibly even a year, maybe not quite a year, before he went up there. What was he thinking? What was in his mind? We know that he wasn't remorseful. He explicitly told investigators that he wished he had done more. If he had known he was going to get caught and be in the situation that he ended up in, he would have done a whole lot more. He had his rules in place. I assume by that point in 2007, he wouldn't have made plans to carry on like he had been. I haven't quite wrapped my head around that move. Perhaps at that time, he felt like he could possibly make a future in his relationship. And we know that while his daughter eventually ended up living with him up there, when he left, that was probably hard for him. But he did sort of allude to the fact that he had plans to bring her up there all along, and he was just trying to figure out what the best possible scenario could end up being. This Keyes, the 2007 Keyes, who is moving to Alaska, is not the 2012 Keyes who's sitting, we listen to talk. He would have been 29 years old with a young daughter, probably around 5 or so, failed relationship, the daughter's mother. And he has contact with his family, his mother and his siblings. At that point, his father had already died, but he has distanced himself from them, at least geographically. And he never really went into whether that was purposefully or, not. I know that it was very apparent that he had fundamentally different views from at least some of his family members. By 29, you start to put things like that aside, and a lot of smiling and nodding occurs, so you can sort of maintain a family bond, even if it's just superficial and, you love them, but we agree to disagree, even if it's just one-sided. He was stationed in Washington, and then if you'll remember, when he found out his daughter was on the way, he made the conscious decision to stay there. So I don't know if he would have been closer to his brothers or some of his sisters or his mother. He doesn't really talk about that. I don't think that he was ever going to be like really close family lunches every week or whatever. I don't see that happening. I don't know if his geographical distance from his family was based on just necessity to be with his daughter, or because he really didn't want to be close to them, except when he chose to go see them. This possibility of a good relationship with the girl that he had been seeing who had moved away, I assume she wanted him to come to Alaska, or he wanted to go, or he wanted to continue what was good in his life. From everything that I just stated, it's clear that this move, at least on the surface, isn't going to do anything to help him in his criminal endeavors. It's going to make it actually a whole lot harder. I have trouble sort of reconciling that he could have not been aware of how much harder it was going to make things on him. What was he thinking? Like, what was in his head? Was it, I'm going to really try hard to live this normal life, and in order to help me do that, I'm, almost isolating myself from the rest of the world? Or did he think, wow, this is going to be my next new challenge? Like, how can I pull off all the stuff I've been doing for all these years while living in Alaska? We don't know. He never really talked about that. I know he didn't express remorse, so I don't feel like it was that kind of thing. It's just a curious move based on the circumstances that we are aware of. We next catch a glimpse of him when he leaves Anchorage on April 24th, 2007, on his way to Oakland, California, where he rents a Kia Rio and puts 1,444 miles on it. On April 26th, he's getting gas in San Diego for that rental car and grabbing a bite to eat in Tijuana, Mexico, where he remains until he crosses back into the United States via San Diego on April 27th, 2007. It appears from San Diego he traveled to Kettleman City, where he stayed in the Best Western Hotel overnight on the 27th going into the 28th. From Kettleman City, he headed to the Shibley Inn in Napa, staying there April 29th, 2007, then heading to Calistoga Golden Haven Spa and Resort on April 30th. On May 1st, Israel Keyes headed to Healdsburg, California, and rented a single-person kayak for the day, finishing out his trip at Safari West on May 1st and May 2nd before flying to Seattle from Oakland on May the 3rd. Arriving in Seattle on May the 3rd, Keyes rents a car and gets a hotel room, driving 111 miles before catching a flight from Seattle back to Anchorage on May the 4th. Back in Anchorage, he has company until May 30th, 2007. And then it seems that he's on his own until June 24th, 2007. Not really any information about exactly what Keyes was up to. A tip that came in on the FBI tip line reported that he had placed an ad in Craigslist that she had responded to with regard to his construction business, and that she had first communicated with him on June 17th, and that she had written him checks for the work that he had done on June the 27th, 2007 and July the 31st, 2007. So between having company at home and his interactions in his attempts to start his new business, it's a pretty safe bet that he was busy doing normal stuff during this time. On August 26, 2007, it appears that Israel flies from Anchorage to Seattle, where he rents a car from her. The details about that car rental are unavailable, except that it appears he turns it in on September 2nd, 2007. There is no information with regard to where he spent the evenings of August 26th, 27th, nor 28th of 2007. Perhaps he headed to Washington's West Coast to see his daughter. He appears to have had a reservation at the Ramada Inn in Sequim on August 29th, 2007, followed by a reservation at La Quinta Inn in Linwood, Washington on August 30th, 2007, before returning to the same Ramada Inn in Sequim on August 31st, 2007. There is no information about where he spent the night of September 1st before turning in the rental car and flying to Salt Lake City, Utah on September 2nd, 2007. After arriving in Salt Lake City, Utah, he rents a car from Advantage Car Rental and appears to have a normal vacation with his girlfriend, traveling to Wyoming before returning to Salt Lake City on September 6th to fly back to Seattle. While the initial transaction indicates that the ticket from Anchorage to Seattle was round trip, leaving August 26, 2007 and returning September 6, 2007, the FBI timeline doesn't indicate that he took that flight back to Anchorage on that date. It does appear that his girlfriend arrived home in Anchorage on September 9th, 2007. She remains in Anchorage until September 23rd, 2007, leaving Keyes to his brothers until October 7th, 2007. Between October 7th, 2007, he had company until he was once again on his own, beginning October 16th, 2007. That activity gives us a little bit of an idea of, when Keyes could have been alone versus when, his girlfriend was at home. They were together. He actually doesn't make another appearance until October 29th, 2007. And at that time, he flies from Anchorage to Los Angeles and rents a white Mitsubishi Lancer from Enterprise. He puts 95 miles on that car before returning it on November 2nd, 2007. It's unclear if Israel Keyes and his girlfriend returned to Anchorage that day as indicated on the round-trip ticket information. However, wherever he was, it does appear that Keyes was on his own, possibly all the way until November 26, 2007. Then, on November 28, 2007, Israel Keyes spends $3 to rent a luggage cart in Cleveland, Ohio, before flying from Anchorage to Seattle, where he rented a convertible for the day and hopped on the Washington State Ferry out of Edmond. On December the 5th, he took a flight from Seattle to Minneapolis, then from Minneapolis to Indianapolis. On December 8th, 2007, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, he rented a silver Mitsubishi Galant and put 537 miles on it before he returned it on December 11th, 2007, only a day late. After returning his car on December 11th, it appears that he remained in Indiana until December 15th, 2007, when he got on a plane back to Minneapolis, then Minneapolis to Seattle, where he rented a 2007 Dodge Caliber, took a ferry ride, and had a hotel reservation before heading back to Anchorage on December 16, 2007. And there you have it. In a nutshell, that was Keyes 2007. It takes me nearly 25 minutes to tell you practically nothing. The very first thing that I saw in 2007 that caught my attention was that on January 10th, he made a $3,000 payment on his credit card. That was an unprecedented amount of money to be paid, at least up to that point, and possibly the entire time we have records for. And anybody who knows Keyes knows that that means he more than likely held up a bank or robbed a store or took some jewelry from somebody. Maybe he sold a bunch of guns or collected some ransom.
And a special thanks to Meg for putting that all together so that I could wrap my head around this killer in 2007. The most shocking, awful, and horrifying parts of this killer are yet to come, but we're that much closer to telling you where the bodies are, and you literally are not going to believe what we tell you. Thanks for joining us. You can reach us at 252-365-5593 or at truecrimexcess.com or truecrimexcess@gmail.com if you want to send us a note. This episode was brought to you by LabrottieCreations.com. That's LABROTTIECREATIONS.com. Check out the merchandise and specifically their fun Pop Pet art custom pieces made from photos of your very own pets. Use the promo code CRIMEXS, that's CRIMEXS, for 20% off a fun, brightly colored, happy piece of art of your own pet at their site, LabrottieCreations.com. Music in this episode was licensed for True Crime XS. The theme song was Indestructible by Noah Smith. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform or at TeePublic, Instagram, or Twitter. You can also join us on Patreon to fund future body exploration trips. But the best thing you can do for us is leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform and share us with your friends. And don't forget, on July 3rd, we are literally revealing where the bodies are buried. See you next week.
This is True Crime XS.
So it was while we were researching the 2007 cases that I decided I was going to take Jamie to one of the locations. I was going to show her what it looked like. And I went in the way that you're supposed to go in, but I marked down the ways that you could go sort of clandestinely because I wanted to look at them as we went past those ways. And I figured out there would be easier ways to do that under the cover of night or not be seen. And, I explored all of that. Here's what's interesting. There's these little short interviews they had they seem like they're meaningless. You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
Well, there's this one that you pointed me back to.
Right, which is why I don't think any of them are meaningless, but I understand what you're saying.
So he talks about, like in the early parts of the interview, this boat and getting permission to search this boat. They picked it up and all that. And the killer is discussing that with them. And it takes place on July 18th. And it's the way it's broken out. So first of all, it's right after the Milpen interview. It's like with the next week, give or take. He's given them permission to search of the Bayliner that they're talking about. At some point, Jeff Bell, he comes back in the room by himself. He goes on the record and he's talking to him about, I want to say, the glove compartment on the boat. So I get out to the location and it's a long ass hike. And I get there and I'm standing there, and I even messaged you pictures and video. I'm standing there and I'm like, all right, finally can show Jamie what I'm talking about. And I go to open the door. The location is locked. And I was like, of all the things on the planet, why do you lock this? And apparently that's a totally normal thing. And
right. And I could see, yeah, I mean.
It's not just locked with a key, mind you. It is bolted shut. It is drilled in with 9 security stars. Well, in this interview, Bell is aiming for something other than what he's talking about with the glove compartment of the boat. And he says, hey, do you remember this that you had on you down in Texas? And we can't see it. We can only hear it because it's like a little digital. Well, you can hear him.
Yeah, you can hear him hit the button there. It's like a drill sound.
Yeah, so he has some form of, based on their conversation, I'm going to play this clip because it's short. He has some kind of tool And what they're picturing is him torturing people with these tools. Well,
right.
My first instinct when I'm standing there looking at the location is to go back to my vehicle and to grab what I presume is probably exactly that tool. And I was messaging you about it about the same time I was talking about it. And the killer even says, well, I usually had bits with it. And I looked at it, and I have this little 6-pack of mobile bits that I bought to go with it, like an accessory pack, and it's got a security star on it, and it's got a 1/4-inch bit, because he said, what could you do with a 1/4-inch bit? And that's exactly what I would have used. I would have used the security star to undo the hinge, and then use the 1/4-inch bit to get in. And
right.
I realized,
and that's exactly when you showed me the thing. I was like, oh, well, that's what they're talking about there.
is that I did not put all that together until we were like researching these cases, and I tried to go to one of the locations, and I was like, holy shit.
I didn't either, but I never thought he was using it as a torture device. Like, he had so many other things that he was using, like, for those purposes. I knew from the time, like, he talked about, like, breaking into things, like, even as, like, a child, I knew that those drills and the tool type things were for breaking and entering, essentially. And I never thought, and I don't think that crossed their mind.
Well, you don't break into houses with that stuff, because he described, killing security locks with an angle grinder, and that's what they were picturing. That tool with the 1/4-inch bit or the star can only be used on a limited set of things. You don't need it to get in a lot of places. Does that make sense? Like, there's other ways to get in easier, pretty much anywhere else on the planet. But if you're trying to access shit,
I mean, I just know. I thought it was weird that the task force officer is thinking what he's thinking, which is that he used it on people because the conversation is short, but it's very uncomfortable to me because, of course, that made it stick out in my mind, so that was good. But he's like, well, so maybe someday you'll tell me, like it's gonna be a thing. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, he just used that to, well, I didn't think unscrew screws, but I thought to get into things. Like that's what.
Well, I didn't know they were locked.
I didn't either. I didn't think about that.
Were...
I just thought like get into things. I didn't know what he was getting into, but I felt like that's why he would have something like that.
When I realized that they were locked, I was like, wait a second. And I think you and I came up with it about the same time because I was messaging you and you said what I was thinking.
So do you think that, so I guess Bell went and got the drill that he had on him, like from evidence or whatever. So I think because they had been talking about like the boat and everything, I think maybe Bell was fishing for like, oh yeah, you can check that. There'll be blood on there, that kind of thing maybe.
Yeah.
But, that didn't happen. But what do you think that he was doing with that drill in Texas?
So here's how that breaks out. Locations are off season at certain times of the year, and they're closed. So that would be a just in case. To me, having the 1/4-inch bit in it is different than having the security. The security bit would have been used for the locations themselves. I already think he went to a location that either wasn't there or wasn't what he expected, and he had a backup location that also did not work out, because seeing that where I think it was and the time that it was, it would have been to get into a particular place. Like, I looked at it from the perspective of, was he trying to get into the cemetery shed? Because there was one, and he had described that cemetery. This is like Post Oak, Glen Oak.
Right. He went there
Glen
on the first trip.
I was picturing that, and then I was mapping him back on the second trip. Wherever he was headed when they popped him, that's where he would have used it. So,
well, and he says, and so, okay, you said a 1/4-inch bit is different than, the other bits you could possibly use. But when he said, I normally have, a bit kit with it or whatever he said, I sort of thought to myself, oh, well, that was there, and, you know, Bell didn't pick that up. He just picked up because he brought it out of evidence. And so if he had the bits that he used on that particular thing, his luggage, or I don't know, wherever he had it, like, it wouldn't necessarily be cataloged with the tool.
No, it just would have been written as an accessory. It's real small, actually. I'm guessing what it was, but based on it being 2012, my tools are probably from 2012. The piece that he's referencing that he kind of threw away there, I think it's actually just a Velcro loop, and the Velcro loop has 6 bits in it. So
right, and all I'm saying is that
it attaches to the handle.
It's very possible, though, that the bits were there. Like, I don't know that we should discount their presence just because they didn't show up then. But I was just curious because I do think he could have just had it on him, you know, just in case.
Yeah.
And, you know, he even says, like, that's a handy tool or whatever. And
yeah, it's not going to have blood on it, though. He's not going to use it for stuff like that.
Right, but
they run on AA batteries. There's no, like, you get, like, one use out of it, and then it's done. It dies.
Right, but the point of it is, like, you don't have to rely on recharging it. Like, you can, as long as you've got fresh batteries, like, you can use it. And how many things do you have to unscrew to get in based on your visual?
Oh, I could do it with one set of batteries. I would need somewhere, depending on which one, because there were 2 different types out there. There were 6 on one, 9 on the other. And then that would not drain the battery because they were like these short security screws. And then I would need to use the 1/4-inch bit on one thing. Like, basically, I'd have to remove I don't know how to describe what it is. It's like a bracket that's screwed on, and it's screwed on in a way that you can no longer open it. So when you remove the security screws, the bracket falls away, and then you take the 1/4-inch bit, and it opens the handle.
Right. Yeah, now I'm following you.
So, like, it would basically be, so it wouldn't use much juice. So the security stars would be on. Most people just don't have that on them. They have a Phillips head and flathead on their little whatever, the camping tool. So the security stars would pull that away, and then you drill. I mean, it'd take you 30 seconds or a minute to get through with a 1/4-inch bit, and you're done. You're inside.
Okay, so then afterwards, does he redo it?
Yeah, so when you're done, it won't even look like you were there. So when you're done, all you do is pull it close, remount the bracket, and you put the security stars back in, and you're done. It wouldn't look like you'd been there.
So, do you think that the practice of putting a more permanent closure on the things during the off season was going on in the late 90s, or is that more recent, or do you have any idea?
I've been looking at that. I found an example of this type of thing as early as 2002, but I haven't found that in the 90s.
Okay. Well, I was just curious because, you know, we know from what Keith said during the interview, like, we know how he handled the situation with the couriers when they fought back and things weren't going as planned. Like, he had a little temper tantrum. That's what it sounded like he was saying happened. And so I could just imagine all the different things that could happen, like having to do this while you've got a victim in tow or whatever. I have thought for a while that the opportunity to own the boat that he got in 2005, I think he was looking for like a different method. And
well, yeah.
The boat lasted for a year and blew up, and so then he was back to his old tricks again because, like, I mean, that's just how it was.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. He didn't want to be attached to the location. I wouldn't too either.
This is Officer Bell. I'm going back on tape. It is the 18th of July. It is 13:15 by my watch. I'm going to go back in with Israel Keys. This time it's just going to be Officer Bell present with Israel. All right. We discussed talk with them again. It sounds like it's winding down at least. So you're close, but they wanted to send me a couple more photos because we do that. Kind of where they're at. That's apparently they got the glove box open. Those are the things in the glove box. Maybe a registration. Yeah. I don't know if that's a flat phone. Yeah. Charger or something like that. I don't know what's on the floating. If there's something inside there or not. Usually that would just be a keychain, some fuses, a bungee, and this is the rope you're talking about. That's just a piece of length of rope, you know. Yeah. But anyhow, that's just kind of what they've given us. Like I said, it should be winding down. And I had one other thing I wanted to show you. Just out of my curiosity. See, you remember that? Yeah. That was in Texas. What's up with that?
Handy tool.
Huh?
It's a handy tool.
We thought it was like a weird thing to have with but it was.
Can I get a restroom break?
Sure. All right. Yeah. You gotta take a leak through that. Okay, flip that light on for me there. Maybe if we,
it's going to come out now regardless.
To see if they could, and it all goes at the pull you in that room. No, we told you there's another needs it to go through his.
Maybe they weren't listening. Yeah.
Never know. They would kind of think.
Is that the drill bit in there?
Yep. 1/4 inch. Handy tool, huh?
Yeah.
Hypothetically, what kind of things could that be used for?
I like that one because it runs off AA batteries.
Don't have to recharge it.
About it charging. Yeah.
I'll take that to silence. I mean, someday maybe you'll talk about that.
Yeah, I didn't use it very often. It was more one of those things that I had just in case.
Just in case you needed to drill a 1/4 inch hole. Yeah. Never know.
Usually I had driver bits with it too. I don't know. Maybe they weren't listening on that trip.
Driver bits, like pilot bit?
Just different types of screwdriver bits. Oh, they fit in there.
Just carry the screws with you and stuff too?
Sometimes. Try to plan for everything.
All right. Well, like I said, they said they're winding down, so we expect any time here to. Frank left to go start his, getting something going, and so when we after we take you back there today, we'll as soon as he has something that has gone through all the bullshit he needs it to go through, then we'll come over and. At least give you the opportunity to come over and present it to you. That probably would be the next thing we would come over for. And then, other than unless you want, Jolene's on another conference call right now, but I'm presuming, am I right to presume that if we hear from Vermont that I assume that they have a good enough relationship with their media people back there that if the media, I presume the media will call them and say, hey, not for nothing, but we're doing this, whether you will or won't confirm it. And, we told you they're not going to confirm it, but it could be that their media is going to say, we waited, we don't care if you confirm it or not, we're running with it. If we hear something like that, would you like me to at least to come over there and let you know that? We won't have to bring you over here for that or anything, but if
they're going to run with it, then there's not much anybody can do about it. So
no, I realize that, but previously you'd said you wanted as much heads up as possible, and that's kind of what one of the things we wanted to do today, give you that heads up. But if I find out it's imminent, I could certainly drive over there and they could pull you up to the front there, and I could just say, hey, pull you in that room like we're going to take you, but don't, and just say, I wanted to come over and let you know that.
Yeah, well, that's great if you get that kind of warning. Like if they're nice enough to let you know it.
Well, we've asked the law enforcement there to do that to us if they get it. When we talked to them about that, they felt like they had that type of relationship that they've stayed off long enough with them that they would probably, although their relationship has somewhat diminished because of it, that they still may give them a. And it also could be that would be some type of idle threat that they would come and say, okay, you're not confirming anything, but we're doing it anyway, to see if they could get a response. So it still may not happen, even if they did that. But
it'd be good to get a heads up, but I don't know. It's going to come out now regardless. So.
All right. Well. I thought you'd at least maybe if we could do that, we will, and don't hold us against us if we can't get there. But or if they don't give them a heads up and it just happens. But we'll try to be the ones to let you know if something like that's going to happen.
All right.
Let me go make another call. Get close. You done with this one?
Yeah.